Welcome back to Buddhism Seeds, where we set down the burdens of the mind and step into a journey of stillness in the quiet of the night. In modern life, we are constantly swept into endless debates: who's right, who's wrong, who's more correct, who's less mistaken. The ego keeps demanding to judge, to prove, to win. And the more we try to prove we're right, the further we drift from the peace that has always been within us. Strangely, when caught in arguments, we believe we are defending the truth, but in reality, we are only defending our ego. The more we argue, the more exhausted we become. The more we strive to win, the more we lose ourselves. Amid all that noise, few ever pause to ask, do I really need to be right? Letting go of the need to be right or wrong does not mean abandoning what is right. It means releasing the stubborn urge to be above others. It is choosing peace over victory, understanding over justification, and silence as a way to protect the heart, because only when we no longer need to be right can we truly listen. Only when we no longer need to win can we gently love. So tonight, as you let your eyes grow heavy and your breath slow down, let these ancient Zen stories guide your heart into quiet places. And the first story begins with a Zen master who answered a question with silence. It was an autumn afternoon. The last sunlight slanted across moss-covered steps as a young seeker walked slowly along the path leading to an old Zen temple. The air was cool and clear, yet inside him rose silent waves of restlessness. His eyes burned like small flames, the light of a soul worn from years of seeking yearning and unrest. He had read countless scriptures. He had debated with many scholars. He had visited dozens of temples, asking countless teachers about the mysteries of existence. But none had given him an answer deep enough. That day, people told him, "This is the last Zen master who might help you. If not him, then no one." So he came carrying in his heart a question he had guarded like a hidden flame for years. What is the truth? The meditation hall stood in an ancient pine forest, weathered as if it had existed before the mountains had names. The wooden door creaked softly, as if even time was holding its breath. He stepped inside. The wooden floor was cool under his feet. In the small room, there was nothing except a blank wall, a simple mat, and the master. He sat there, back straight, hands resting lightly on his knees, eyes half closed. Evening light streamed through the lattice window, falling across the floor like a thin golden veil over his dark brown robe. The seeker knelt, bowed deeply, and spoke hoarse, yet trembling with resolve. "Master, what is the truth?" The air froze. No more wind in the pines. No more birds calling to their flocks. Even the dust seemed to stop drifting. The master slowly opened his eyes. They were as deep as an ancient lake, unmoving, unreflective, yet making the seeker feel completely seen through. He looked straight at him. No words, no movement, no smile, no frown. Only silence. The master's gaze was neither harsh nor gentle. It did not try to convey anything, yet every thought in the seeker's mind went out like candles blown by wind. He waited. In his mind, hundreds of answers could have echoed. Truth is the ultimate. Truth is the eternal nature of all things. Truth is the wisdom beyond all dualities. But no, the master said nothing. He waited longer, seconds, minutes, then longer still. Time in that room melted like salt and water. He no longer knew how long he had been kneeling, only that sweat dotted his forehead. His heart pounded heavy and thoughts fell from his mind like dying leaves. Part of him screamed, "Answer me. I must know. But another part softened, loosened, dissolved, and then he realized the room had never been this silent, and he had never been this silent. No more questions, no more waiting for answers, only presence. Only a clear, still space in which he could hear his own heartbeat drip like water into a deep well. The master remained motionless, as stone as an ancient tree rooted in a mountain, as a lake unbroken by ripples. No sermon, no definition, no profound saying to take home proudly and declare I have found the truth. The seeker bowed low, then silently stepped away, each footfall so light it made no sound on the wood. Outside, the forest glowed gold in the sunset. Wind passed through the pines, sounding like distant bells. He walked on, saying nothing, thinking nothing, no longer searching, just breathing. And in that moment, for the first time in years, he no longer felt lacking. The master still sat in the white room as if no one had ever entered, still silent like the evening itself, and somewhere on the rising night sky, a small star quietly lit up, wordless still. Have you ever been in such a moment? When a great question quietly rose inside you about life's meaning, about right and wrong, about the purpose behind everything unfolding. You waited for an answer, for a voice to break through, clear and thunderous, like lightning tearing open the dark, erasing the confusion tangled in your mind. But instead, life stayed silent. Not the gentle silence of a calming melody, but the heavy, suffocating silence that unsettles you. It feels like knocking on a locked door. The more you knock, the more no reply comes. And you begin to wonder, maybe you're on the wrong path. Maybe there is no truth at all. Maybe the universe is a cold and meaningless joke. We respond to that silence in the only way we've been trained. We go searching. We read more books. We dig up more theories. We pile new concepts into our minds. We believe that if we are smart enough, diligent enough, analytical enough, we will finally reach the right answer and our minds will be at peace. But ironically, the more we search, the more tangled we become. The more we stack up theories and logic, the farther we drift from what we truly need, not a definition, but clarity. And clarity does not come from the noise of thinking. It only comes when the noise subsides. The more we chase truth, the more it becomes a mirage. Like trying to grasp mist, the tighter you hold, the more it vanishes. Because truth is not something to possess, not a formula, to memorize, not a string of words to understand. Truth is when the mind is still enough that it no longer needs an answer. It is when we drop the need to know, and for the first time, simply see life as it is without demanding it. Be logical, meaningful, or labeled. Because the need for answers is the root of confusion. And when the mind stops not chasing, not judging, not grasping, truth, which never left, reveals itself like the sky reveals itself when the clouds dissolve. And you realize truth is not something to understand with the mind, but something to live with a still heart. In this modern world, you and I live in a giant storm of information. Every day, from the moment we open our eyes, hundreds of headlines, thousands of comments, tens of thousands of opinions pour into our heads like a never-ending downpour. They come from social media, emails, news feeds, endless conversations. They pull you from one debate to another, one argument to the next, making your mind run like an overheated machine, never pausing, never breathing. We often mistake it for wisdom, because society praises those who know a lot, understand quickly, and respond fast. We are taught to always have an opinion, to analyze, to judge, to answer. And we believe that if we read more, know more, debate more, we will become deeper. But the truth is, that is not wisdom. It is exhaustion. Have you ever felt that way? Waking up and grabbing your phone right away, and after just a few lines your heart races, your face heats with anger at an opinion you dislike. You quickly type a rebuttal dive into an argument as if you were defending justice itself. But by the end of the day, when your mind is tangled and your spirit drained, you suddenly realize you haven't truly understood anything more. You're just more exhausted than ever. Because the mind is not a machine built to carry endless amounts of information, endless judgments of right and wrong. It needs quiet to connect, to digest, to see what truly matters. But we never stop, because we fear that if we pause, we'll fall behind. Because we fear silence, which seems empty, yet is actually the richest soil for wisdom to grow. And that is why the Zen master's teaching, though wordless, could save the mind from the storm. He didn't reply, didn't argue, didn't explain. He simply stayed silent. That silence was not emptiness, but wholeness. He did not add another thought to the student's already overloaded mind. He returned to him an open space where he could see all the noise was only surface ripples. And in that moment, the student sensed for the first time what we in this noisy era are most lacking: a mind that doesn't need to react, only to be present. Because real wisdom is not about knowing more, but about knowing when to stop in the flood of information, to return the mind to stillness where truth has never left. Not every question needs an answer. You don't need to solve every mystery of life to live a meaningful life. In fact, some things lose their simple beauty the more we analyze them. Like when you stand before a blazing sunset. If you get caught up in wavelengths, air refractions, and dust particles that make up the red, you no longer truly see the sunset. All that remains are dry numbers, while the most precious thing, the beauty spreading across the sky, slips away. Our minds are trained to always question, to hunt for causes, to demand, to know. That is useful for many things, but not for everything. There are moments when the harder you try to understand, the more distance you create between yourself and life itself. You are no longer living, just analyzing life. That's why stillness is sometimes deeper than reasoning. Wisdom is not only in what we say, but in the ability to pause, to look deeply, and to be silent when needed. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is not defeat nor escape. On the contrary, silence is an act of courage. Courage to not react right away. Courage to not judge too quickly. Courage to face the movements within your own heart, even if they are chaotic, conflicting, or uncomfortable. We often think that to solve a problem, we must think more, talk more, argue more. But sometimes it is the noise in our head that keeps us from seeing what is truly happening. When the mind is still, the truth rises on its own, like the bottom of a well appearing when the water stops rippling. You don't need to find truth, you just need to make your mind still enough for truth to appear. In today's noisy world that matters even more, you can't outrun every argument. You can't respond to thousands of opinions flooding in each day. You can't win every debate, and you don't need to. You can choose to step out of them. Choose to keep peace in your heart even when chaos surrounds you. Choose to stop, breathe deeply, and step back, not from weakness, but because you understand nothing is worth trading away your inner peace. And when you stop, you will see something strange. The world keeps turning. People keep arguing. Storms keep roaring. But you're no longer swept into them. You stand still, steady like a tree in the wind, light as the sky after rain. In our modern social life, this sounds like going against the current. We are taught that we must debate to progress, must argue to prove ourselves, must talk more to avoid being left behind. The world keeps warning you, if you don't speak up, you'll be forgotten. If you don't defend your views, others will crush you. So we charge into arguments like warriors, always ready to reason, to counter, to react. Every day, the mind becomes a noisy battlefield where you dare not pause, even for a beat, afraid that if you go quiet, people will think you're weak, wrong, or not good enough. But try just once. Do nothing. No arguing. No trying to be right. No need to win. Just sit and breathe. You will see something miraculous. The world doesn't collapse. No one forgets you. No one takes your worth away. The only thing that changes is that your mind begins to quiet. And in that quiet, you'll realize what you've missed all along. Some things can't be understood by logic. They can only be known through presence. Some truths can't be spoken. They can only be lived. Like when you stand before the ocean at night, you don't need to define beauty or describe the depth of the sea. You just stand there breathing, feeling the salty wind thread through your hair, and in that moment, you know you are alive. No need to explain, no need to justify, just like the student long ago. He came with a burning question. What is truth? And left empty-handed. No answer, no definition, no words from the master. Yet perhaps he carried home something far more precious, a lighter soul light, because it no longer needed to chase. In a world that keeps pushing you to move forward, sometimes the bravest act is to stop. Because moving forward is not always growth. Some growth only happens when you sit still, look deeply within, and smile without needing an answer. If you are carrying hundreds of unanswered questions, if you are exhausted from proving you are smart, right, or better, then maybe what you need right now is not another answer, but a pause. A pause to remember. You don't need to have answers for everything happening in your life. You don't need to be right to be at peace. You don't need to explain everything to know your own worth. We have grown used to living in a world that always demands explanations. Everything must be analyzed, dissected, debated, argued. And we believe once we have enough answers, enough understanding, we will be at peace. But reality is different. The more we chase answers, the more exhausted we become. The more being right we pile on our shoulders, the heavier we feel. Because answers are not always healing. Sometimes they are just dry shells covering the chaos inside. And it is the endless demand for answers that tangles and scatters the mind. What we truly need is to stop like the old Zen master did, not arguing, not preaching, not defining truth. He simply sat, looked into the student's eyes, and stayed silent. That silence did what 1,000 words could not. It quenched the noise inside the student's mind, giving him a clear space to breathe, to hear himself again. You need such a space too. A space where the questions in your head stop screaming, where the pressure to be right, to be smart, to be better can fall away like autumn leaves. Because when you no longer need an answer, your mind will soften. And in that softness, you will hear what matters most, the voice within yourself. That voice is not loud, not explaining, not defending. It only whispers gently, "You are okay. You don't need to be right to be loved. You only need to be here." And maybe that is the deepest answer you've been seeking all along. I want to tell you an ancient story short, but if you listen deeply, it might change the way you look at your whole life. Dusk was falling on the outskirts of Rajagaha. The dirt path into the quiet forest lay like a brown thread stretched across the hillside. Wind moved through the bamboo tops. The rustle of leaves sounded like a faraway whisper. A middle-aged man followed the narrow trail, his pace urgent, but his eyes strangely bright, the look of someone carrying a whole sky of questions in his head. Year after year, he had read scriptures, studied mathematics, researched astronomy. He recorded numbers on the orbits of the stars, compared the words of sages, debated with scholars. His knowledge swelled like a storeroom, and the fuller it grew, the wider a nameless emptiness opened within him. Every night in the stillness, a question flared up like a spark. Does this universe have an edge? Where does it begin? Where does it end? And strangely, the more he asked, the heavier his chest grew, the more uneven his breath became. He heard people say the Buddha was resting in a nearby grove of bamboo. He decided to go. If this enlightened one can't solve it, who could? He thought, his heart taut like a drawn string. Past the rim of the forest, he saw an open patch of ground. Late sunlight spread pale gold over the grass. In the center, the Buddha sat on a rough mat, back straight, hands resting lightly on his thighs, eyes half open still as a windless lake. A few novices stood quietly to the side. It was as if a transparent layer covered the air itself, making every sound soften on its own. The man came closer, knelt, and put his palms together. His voice, used to lecturing and debate, grew small in the presence of the teacher's peace-blessed one. Does the universe have limits? Is there a point of beginning, and then? Is there a point of ending? As the last word fell, the forest hushed. No birds, no wind, only the quiet beat of his heart in his chest. He looked up. The Buddha looked at him. That gaze neither pushed away nor pulled near. It neither judged nor praised. It was like a mirror so clear that everything revealed itself naturally. After a long while, very long, the Buddha spoke, his voice light, as if touching a water's edge. Those things will not end your suffering. The sentence was so short, it could not be shortened. So simple it seemed to contain nothing at all. Yet it dropped into the man's heart like a stone into a deep well, sending rings that widened and widened. He froze. Will not end my suffering, he repeated in his mind, as if dissecting each word. Then confusion rose. He had thought he was about to touch the ultimate secret, to hear a discourse on the origin of the cosmos, the borders of space, the finite and the infinite. But the answer was a different door suffering. He looked at his hands. Those long fingers had held pens and rulers, sketching complex diagrams. Those hands were used to the feel of control, pose a hypothesis, prove it, conclude. But now they trembled slightly, the kind of trembling that comes when what you've clung to quietly slips from your grasp. Why does the Blessed One not speak of origins, he wanted to ask, but his lips did not open? Because in that very gaze, he saw something he had never dared face. He was suffering. Not suffering from a lack of knowledge, but from an invisible cord tightening around his chest, the need to have an answer in order to feel at ease. A light wind passed. Bamboo leaves tilted softly. The Buddha remained serene. He added no words offered, no theory to replace another. He did not draw the man into a new round of debate. He simply left that sentence standing there quiet like a mirror for the man to see himself. Layers of why rose in his mind. Why isn't understanding the universe enough? Why does knowledge, the very thing he worshipped, not touch what hurts most? He remembered sleepless nights, staring at the ceiling, mind circling formulas, while his heart stayed heavy. He remembered mornings looking down at a bowl of rice he couldn't swallow, because a vague sense of meaninglessness was rising. He remembered a relative's offhand remark, piercing his pride like a needle. At that moment, he knew the structure of the Milky Way, yet didn't know how to let his shoulders loosen. Those things will not end your suffering. The words returned this time, not like a challenge, but like a hand set on his shoulder. He saw clearly he had wandered into a dead-end alley with a sign that read, "Knowledge." The sign was beautiful, glittering, persuading people that if they kept going, they would see open sky. But the path under his feet led deeper into a dark cave, where each answer lit only a brief spark, after which the darkness grew thicker. The Buddha glanced toward the clear water pooled in a nearby hollow. He said nothing, but the man suddenly remembered a simple example he had once heard: the finger pointing at the moon. The finger shows the direction, but if you cling to the finger, you never see the moon. Isn't knowledge concepts, systems, theories that finger? And what he needed, what he lacked, was the moonlight, the ability to be fully present, to know the moment suffering arises within him, and to let it go when it is ready to dissolve. He drew a breath. The smell of damp earth, tender grass, evening wind touched his senses, things so ordinary he had long ignored them. Right now, right here, he told himself, the restlessness in my chest is present. For the first time, he did not try to press it down with a new theory. He looked straight at it, like watching a dark cloud drift across the sky. Strangely seen head-on, it was no longer as fierce. He looked up. The Buddha still sat there. He did not urge the man to believe, nor tell him to abandon what he believed. He guided without words, do not question the universe before you clearly see the tear on your own cheek. The man knew that if right then the Buddha gave a long discourse on the finite and the infinite, his intellect would thrill, his pen would race, the pages would fill. But when night came, his chest would still be heavy, the cord would still tighten. Now with one short sentence, the Buddha had set the blade to the true knot. The man bowed his head. It was not a bow of defeat in debate, but of recognizing a new path, the path inward. He understood knowledge is still precious, still needed, but it is a means. Awareness clear, seeing in the present without clinging, is the doorway out of the prison of suffering. A few bamboo leaves spiraled down and touched the ground. He stood. There was no answer to tuck into his pocket, no formula to recount to friends. But the cord in his chest felt looser. His steps were lighter as he walked toward the forest's edge. The sun had fully set. A thin band of violet stretched across the sky. Crickets sang steadily. Everything was as it had been and somehow utterly different. On the path home, he no longer drifted through thoughts about the universe's edge. He noticed the sound of his heels touching earth, the rhythm of his breath, in and out the brush of wind against his face. The questions were still there, not erased. It was just that they were no longer chains. They lay like stones by the roadside present, but not forcing anyone to carry them. That night, when he lay down, sleep came to him light as floating duckweed, not because he now knew the boundary of the universe, but because he had seen the boundary of what truly matters before knowledge liberation, before every knowing peace. And that peace does not lie in some answer to come, but in the ability to stop right now, to look straight at suffering, to name it, and then let it go. At the forest's edge, the Buddha closed his eyes. Night settled. Above, the sky stretched boundless, no one knowing where it begins or ends. Yet within that boundlessness, one thing was certain: when a person stops clinging to answers, suffering begins to loosen. And perhaps that is the only cosmology worth living, with the cosmos of a mind abiding in the present, so spacious that every chord slips free. In our era, you and I live in an ocean of knowledge unlike any before it. Each morning, as soon as we open our eyes, hundreds of news bits, thousands of posts, tens of thousands of new data points pour into our minds like unending rain. From social media, books and magazines, podcasts, videos, seminars, everywhere, there are lectures, teachings, analyses, advice. And we plunge into them like the thirsty in a desert, reading, watching, learning, saving, noting, analyzing, as if just one pause would leave us behind. We believe that knowing more will make us stronger, more peaceful, closer to happiness. But have you ever stopped to ask, do all these things really make you more at peace? Or do they only make your mind louder while your heart stays empty? There are people who know a great deal but cannot sleep, who understand deeply yet remain lonely, who know widely yet when night falls still don't know how to hold themselves when in pain. Knowledge can fill your head, but it cannot fill the emptiness in your heart. Knowledge can make you win arguments, but it cannot stop your body from trembling in solitude. Knowledge can make you stand out in a crowd, but it cannot keep you from feeling lost when you're alone. We have mistaken things, mistaken understanding for liberation, mistaken grabbing as much as possible for letting go at the right time, mistaken knowing with the mind for knowing through full presence in each moment. Therefore, the Buddha reminds us, do not try to expand the outer world if you are still shackled inside. Do not cram in more knowledge when your mind has never once grown still enough to hear what you actually need. Knowledge can help you understand millions of stars, but only awareness can show you the star within that is going dim. Knowledge can open maps of the whole universe, but only awareness can open the door out of suffering. In the end, what you need is not to know everything, but to know how to turn inward and free yourself from the shackles of fear, anxiety, anger, and the pressure to be perfect. The sea of knowledge will remain ever wider, ever deeper, but without awareness, you will only keep swimming in it, never truly reaching a shore. In modern society, this may sound very against the current. We live in an age that worships knowledge, praising sharp minds, dazzling resumes. People who can move markets, catch trends, and get ahead of the times. From childhood, we were taught, the more you know, the more you succeed. The more skilled you are, the happier you'll be. So we charge forward without rest. We pile up diplomas, awards, certificates, like stacking stones to build a high tower. We stuff our heads with heaps of new information, read hundreds of books, take courses by the dozen, add skills, update the news daily, as if pausing for a moment would leave us behind. But there is a truth few dare to face. Success does not always equal peace. You can climb to the summit of your career, hold everything society calls success, fame, money, power. But if your heart is still full of anger, comparison, fear, suspicion, that summit is only a cold, lonely peak. You may know how to run a company, but not how to let go of an old grudge that gnaws at you each night. You may know how to conquer a market, but not how to stop for a few minutes to hear your own breath. You may know how to solve the world's problems, but not how to hold the wounded child within you who still cries quietly beneath your pile of achievements. Knowledge can take you very far, but awareness is what can bring you home. For knowledge faces outward to expand, to accumulate, to conquer. Awareness turns inward to listen, to heal, to let go. And if you only look outward and never turn inward, you might pass through a whole lifetime without ever truly living a single day. What the Buddha taught was not to abandon learning, and he never disparaged knowledge, but he reminded us to set our priorities right. If knowledge is the tool, awareness is the one who wields it. A tool, no matter how sharp, is meaningless if the user does not know what they are doing. Abundant knowledge is useless if the learner's mind is still full of afflictions, greed, anger, ego clinging. You can study the stars, but don't forget to look at the wound still bleeding in your heart. If you do not heal yourself, all your understanding of the cosmos is only cold numbers that cannot comfort a hurting soul. You can read hundreds of books, but don't forget to spend time sitting quietly just to breathe and feel yourself. If you don't know how to stop, all the knowledge you collect becomes only dust settling on a drying spirit. You can build grand structures, but don't forget to cultivate a place of peace within. Without a home inside to return to, every outer castle is only a cold, lonely wall. We often mistake the measure of life's quality for how much we know. In truth, that only determines how far we can go, while what determines whether we live happily is whether we are aware as we live each moment, aware enough to know when to stop, aware enough to recognize when we're angry, afraid, tired, and not let those emotions steer our whole life, aware enough to remember we are not racing anyone, aware enough to understand it is not knowing more that brings happiness, but knowing we are alive right now. In the end, you are not remembered for what you know, but for how you lived, how fully you were present for those you love, how gently you treated yourself on stormy days. Knowledge is the lamp that lights the road, but awareness is the one who carries that lamp through the long night. And if you must choose a life that does not have to know everything, but lives each day fully and in peace. Maybe right now, your heart is crowded with hundreds of unanswered questions about life's meaning, about why things happen as they do, about the future, about right and wrong, gain and loss. You toil after big answers, hoping that once you understand everything, your heart will feel less empty, less lost. But the truth is, You don't need to understand the entire universe to be at peace. The universe is not a problem you must solve before you're allowed to rest, and life does not demand that you grasp every law before you have the right to be calm. You only need to understand yourself right in this moment. That vast universe is not far away. It lives in each breath you take, in each beat of your heart, in each feeling that rises softly and then fades. And if right now you can pause, let all the questions fall. Place a hand on your chest, draw a gentle, deep breath, and smile softly to yourself. Then you have touched what others spend a lifetime seeking: freedom from suffering. Because peace has never depended on how much you know, but on whether you are truly present for yourself in a moment when there is nothing to chase, nothing to prove. You simply get to be yourself. And that is enough. I'll tell you a very small story, so small that if you don't listen closely, you might miss it. But sometimes, it's precisely the small things that can turn a whole life around. That morning, the first sunlight filtered through the tall pines, slipped between thick leaves, and touched the moss-covered tiles of an ancient temple deep in the forest. The morning bell had just faded. The space was as silent as a sleeping lake. The wind hadn't woken yet. Even the birds didn't dare sing. Only a thin thread of incense smoke drifted like a faint brushstroke across the sky. In the temple courtyard, a young student stepped out of the meditation hall, his feet moving lightly as if afraid to stir the wind. His face shone. His eyes looked as though they were cradling the sun. For many years, he had lived here amid deep woods and stillness, practicing meditation with devotion. Each day, he sat for hours unmoving beneath an old pine, chanted ancient sutras in an even voice without missing a word, and studied each old teaching like drinking precious drops of water. He had passed countless long nights sunk in silence, facing nameless fears and the whirlpools of his own mind. And now, this morning, in the stillness of the mountains and forest, it was as if a door had opened inside him. He couldn't name what had happened, only knew his heart felt light as the early summer breeze. He walked to the temple veranda where his old teacher, the one who had taught him since the first day he entered the gate, stood with his back turned, holding a worn bamboo broom. The master was sweeping scattered yellow leaves from the old brick floor, slowly, steadily, like a wordless song. The student stopped before his teacher and bowed deeply. He heard his heart beating fast in his chest. When he looked up, his eyes gleamed with joy. His voice trembled slightly with emotion. "Master, I think I have awakened." The wind seemed to stop. The birds fell silent. The world seemed to freeze for a moment. The Zen master lifted his head and looked at him. His gaze was as deep as a well, as still as autumn water. No ripple, no trace of surprise. He did not ask, "What is awakening?" He did not say, "Well done." He offered no congratulations, no objection. He simply smiled. A faint smile like pale sunlight slipping through clouds. Then without a word, he bent down and continued sweeping the courtyard. The bamboo broom touched the old bricks, making a soft whispering sound. Swish, swish. With each stroke, the dry leaves slid aside, leaving the path clean as if no footsteps had ever been there. The student stood motionless, hands still folded. The smile on his lips slowly faded. Inside, a hard-to-name feeling slipped in, not disappointment, not sadness, but a vast quiet. He had thought that after years of meditation, after long nights wrestling with himself, when he spoke those words, his teacher would embrace him, nod, declare that he had arrived. But the teacher only swept the yard. Each light stroke seemed to sweep away the questions in the student's heart, the pride just beginning to bud the notion that there was a someone there to awaken. He watched the teacher's movements and suddenly felt the old courtyard expand into infinity. Leaves still fell, the wind still blew, birds began to sing, and everything went on as it always had. And he remained standing as if he had just fallen out of a dream. In that moment, he was no longer sure he had awakened to anything. Only a weightless open space remained, and the bamboo broom kept whispering steadily, like the murmur of the earth, like Zen's answer, without words. "Do you see what happened?" The student approached with a blazing heart, hoping for recognition, but received only silence. He wanted praise, a proud look, a sign that the master had seen his achievement. Yet all he received was a faint smile and a broom continuing to sweep as if no one had been standing there. Because the teacher knew that if the student had truly awakened, he wouldn't need to say it. One who has touched truth no longer needs to declare it. Just as a lotus does not have to call itself a lotus, people still know it by its fragrance. Truth needs no introduction. Light needs no promotion. What is truly deep never has to shout to be recognized. Have you ever felt like that, student? You work without stop and strive without rest, push yourself to the limit, then quietly hope for a seeing glance. You hope someone will nod, someone will smile, someone will say, "You're excellent, you're worthy, you've arrived." You long for a gentle touch from the world to confirm that you truly have value. But the more you try to prove yourself, the more tired you become. Because you're using other people's eyes to define who you are. And when those eyes don't turn your way, you suddenly feel empty and start doubting everything you've done. In truth, what exhausts us is not the work, it's the craving for recognition. You can work 16 hours a day without feeling tired, but a single cold criticism or an indifferent look can make your whole heart collapse because you've placed your worth in other people's hands. We grow up in a world that always teaches us to prove ourselves, get high scores to prove you're smart, climb to high positions to prove you're deserving, make lots of money to prove you're successful. We step into life like warriors who must never stop, always running faster, being better, standing out more. But do you see the paradox? The more you try to prove yourself, the more you never feel enough. When your self-worth depends on external validation, you will chase it endlessly like drinking seawater. The more you drink, the thirstier you get. That's why the student fell silent when the teacher only kept sweeping. No praise, no recognition, no medal. Because truth doesn't need to be proven, it only needs to be lived. And your worth is the same. You don't need to prove you are worthy. You only need to live wholeheartedly, do your best, and walk with a peaceful heart. Those who need to see will see. Those who don't, no matter. You were not born to be evidence for anyone. You were born to be yourself. And only when you let go of the need to prove yourself can you truly be free. The student's story reminds us of something vital, something we easily forget in the machinery of modern life. You do not need to prove your worth. Real worth does not lie in what you say, nor in lines of accomplishments on a resume, nor in the diplomas on your wall, or praise from others. Real worth lies in how you live each day. Those who are truly capable don't need to shout about it. Like a mountain that needs no introduction, people still look up with quiet reverence. The mountain doesn't compete for attention, doesn't lecture about its height or the age of its stones. It simply stands silent and steady, and its very presence inspires respect. People are the same. You don't have to proclaim that you've grown, that you're strong, that you're happy. If you are truly happy, you no longer need to prove it. True happiness needs no advertisement. It spreads like a flower's fragrance, gentle and quiet, yet noticeable to anyone who passes by. In fact, the more you try to prove your worth, the more you lose your inner peace. When you seek worth through others' eyes, you live like a leaf in the wind, always tilting toward what others expect. You'll be ruled by praise and blame, applause and indifference. And you will never feel enough, because external recognition is always fragile and fleeting. True worth is not something you have, but something you are. It isn't made of what you stick onto yourself, but of your genuine, kind, steady nature kept day after day, whether anyone sees it or not. So stop chasing the need to prove you're good and start truly being good by living kindly, working hard, staying humble, and being fully present in the smallest things. One day you'll realize those who don't need to prove themselves are the very ones the world quietly respects. And the second lesson the teacher silently gave the student, and one many of us need to remember in this noisy age, is this: true achievement doesn't need display. Achievement is like the sun. It doesn't need banners or ads announcing it is rising yet. When it appears, the whole world grows bright. Sunlight needs no explanation. It only needs to be present and everything is illuminated. The deeper a person is, the fewer words they need. The more they understand, the less they compete. The more they achieve, the less they boast. They know real value isn't in the noise outside, but in steadiness within. By contrast, those who must talk incessantly about themselves, who list their wins and prove their brilliance, are often those who don't truly trust themselves yet. Showing off is only a garment covering insecurity. Those who have truly arrived don't need to shout that they have. Have you noticed deep rivers usually run quiet while shallow streams are the ones that splash and foam? Likewise, those truly seasoned are calm. They no longer need to impress. They know achievement doesn't need to be seen. It only needs to be lived fully each day. Those who reach real depth carry a natural humility, not because they try to look humble, but because they no longer have the need to assert themselves. Like that Zen master, no praise or criticism, no verdict on who is awakened, just quietly sweeping the courtyard each stroke, clearing away the pride just beginning to sprout. That is the pinnacle of maturity, silent yet worthy of bowed respect. No flashiness, no proving, just step by step steady, because your very presence is already the clearest proof of your achievements. And finally, the most precious thing, the lesson the teacher passed on through each stroke of the broom touching the temple floor. Humility is the sign of maturity. Humility does not mean belittling yourself nor denying your efforts and accomplishments. Humility simply means not needing to be above anyone. You don't have to stand over others to affirm your worth. You only need to be yourself, whole, genuine, and enough. In modern society, people often confuse confidence with arrogance. We're encouraged to stand out, to perform, to seize the spotlight, to be recognized. Yet that very race to be above others drains the heart and pulls us away from true peace. The higher you strain to stand, the more you must look down, and that downward gaze slowly closes the heart. A mature person doesn't need a peak to feel big. They know true greatness is the ability to bend down and still keep the light in their eyes, not the light of competition, but the light of compassion, understanding, and respect. Have you noticed those we truly respect are rarely the loud ones boasting of their victories, but the calm, gentle ones whose every word and action carries the weight of ripened understanding? They don't need applause because they know their worth does not live in clapping hands. They don't need to be better than, because they know each person walks a unique path. No one has to lose for them to win. It is precisely that ease and composure that marks the summit of inner strength, a power that doesn't need to strain but shines of its own in stillness. Humility does not make you smaller. On the contrary, it helps you grow deep and steady like an ancient tree. The deeper the roots, the steadier it stands in storms, quietly casting cool shade for the world. Today's world seems to demand that you prove something, prove that you're worthy, that you're successful, that you're superior. From school, we're used to needing high grades to be recognized. At work, we climb to higher positions to prove our ability. Online, we must appear happy, fulfilled, interesting. So we aren't seen as falling behind. Life becomes an endless competition where we must constantly produce evidence that we are worthy of love. But you don't have to live as a piece of evidence. You were not born to be a living resume for others to inspect. You were born to live as yourself, a human being blooming day by day, and quiet without noise, without rivalry, without needing to be great in anyone's eyes. What's most precious in you is not in your bio, not in your job title, not in medals, awards, or numbers assigned by others. It lives in each moment. You are genuine in each gentle look you offer, in each time you sit to listen to someone with your whole heart. In each step you take softly through the world, not trying to impress, only to be present. Only when you no longer need to prove yourself are you truly free, free from the pressure to outdo others, free from the fear of being forgotten, free from the endless race whose prize recedes like a shadow. Like the student that day standing quietly as his teacher swept the courtyard. Perhaps for the first time, he realized there's no need to be dazzling, only still enough for the wind to pass through, while the heart remains at peace. In the end, you don't need recognition from the whole world. You need acknowledgement from yourself. And that has never come from loud praise outside, but from the quiet seeds you sow each day like a flower, blooming in silence, needing no audience, yet still releasing its fragrance. One autumn afternoon, when the cool seasonal breeze had just brushed the rustling golden leaves, a wealthy merchant came to see a famous Zen master who lived in seclusion in the mountains. The merchant entered the temple courtyard, brimming with confidence. Not a wrinkle touched his silk robe. Gold rings flashed in the late sunlight, and his eyes were sharp, the gaze of someone used to giving orders and winning calculated negotiations. He walked quickly, as if entering a boardroom, not a Zen hermitage deep in the forest. As soon as he sat down, he didn't bother to look around. didn't pause to hear the wind or take in the scent of incense threading through the air. His voice rang out firm and hard like a hammer-striking master. I've come here to seek the truth. But truth, if it exists, must be reasonable. It must be logical. It must be provable. If there's no clear reasoning, I cannot believe. Finished, he leaned back, folded his arms, his sharp gaze seeming to challenge the Zen master to present an argument as he demanded from business partners. The Zen master said nothing. No debate, no rebuttal. He simply smiled slightly, his eyes like still water, reflecting no waves. Then, unhurried, he took an old clay teapot and slowly tilted it to pour into the cup before the merchant. The hot tea released a gentle fragrance. A thin wisp of steam drifted like a ribbon through the sunlight. The pale brown stream rose and rose. From the bottom of the cup, the surface climbed, touched the rim, then overflowed. Drops of hot tea rolled onto the wooden table, spreading like faint bands of light. The merchant frowned, staring. The tea kept flowing, unstopping. Then suddenly, "Stop, stop!" he burst out, voice alarmed. "The cup is full, can't you see? It can't hold any more." The Zen master stopped his hand. He set the teapot down. Not hurried, not slow. Then he lifted his head, looked straight at the merchant with a gaze steady as mountain stone, and said gently, "Exactly. Your mind is the same." The words fell into the air like a drop striking a still lake, neat and light, yet sending hundreds of ripples outward. The merchant stood there, eyes still glittering with pride, but deep within them a flicker of confusion passed. In that instant he realized, for years, he had only kept adding to his mind more knowledge, more arguments, more calculations, more ego, until there was no space left for anything new to enter. And amid the lingering scent of tea in the air, he suddenly felt he had never truly listened to anything, only analyzed, never truly received, only judged. The cup still sat there, tea still brimming over, quiet as a mirror, reflecting himself, crammed full, heavy, and with no room left for truth. Do you see it? The merchant came seeking truth, but his mind was packed with his own reasons, opinions, and prejudices. So full, there wasn't a single empty spot left to hear anything new. Like a teacup, already overflowing, no matter how much you pour it, only spills with not a single drop truly soaking in. And this is exactly what the Zen master meant to point out. A full mind cannot receive anything new. In modern life, we are often like that merchant. We enter every conversation, lesson, and experience with a head full of "I already know, I'm right, I've heard this before." We mistake that for understanding, but in fact, it's a closed door. And when the door is closed, even if truth knocks, we won't hear it. To learn something new, to see something deeper, the mind needs emptiness, like an empty bowl. A blank page, soft soil, not yet sown. Only when we loosen the ego that wants to assert itself can we truly receive, because what is most precious never enters places already crammed with the old. So if you truly want to grow, don't just ask, "What more do I need to know?" Ask, "Am I ready to let go of what's crowding my mind?" Because only an empty mind can welcome the light. Have you ever found yourself in that situation? When someone offers gentle feedback, you immediately counter as if you must defend yourself from a threat. When someone presents a new perspective, you rush to find faults instead of listening to understand. When you read something unfamiliar, you dismiss it, before grasping it simply because it doesn't match what you already know. We think we're using reason, but in fact, we're using the ego to resist what's unfamiliar. And that ego, not reason, is the biggest wall blocking our learning and growth. When the mind is packed tight with old concepts, fixed views, and well-worn arguments, then no matter how new, deep, or precious something is, it cannot sink in. Just as you can't pour water into an upside-down glass, you can't receive truth if your mind is sealed inside the shell of "I'm right." Self-protection through argument may make you feel safe, but it also turns you into a lonely fortress where nothing new can enter. So sometimes growth doesn't come from piling on more reasons, but from daring to open up to listen and to admit you do not know. Only when you lower the ego can you truly learn something new. The second lesson the Zen master left quiet yet profound is this: to learn something new, you must first loosen your grip on your reasoning. Reason isn't bad. In fact, it's necessary, like maps that help us orient, understand the world, and avoid getting lost. But when we cling to reasoning, we get trapped in it. Because reasoning is only a map, while life is a living landscape changing each moment without borders or fixed lines. Imagine walking through a forest while staring only at the map in your hand. You'll miss the cool breeze through your hair, the bird's song ringing on the branches, and the sky changing color right before your eyes. A map can tell you a place's name, but it can't give you the scent of the soil, the feel of sunlight on your skin, or the sound of a brook beside the path. That day, the merchant brought too many maps, theories, viewpoints, and tangled logic he believed were truth. But those very maps veiled the sky within his mind, keeping him from seeing what was truly happening in the present. The Zen master didn't argue to tear up those maps. He simply poured tea, letting the man see for himself when a cup is too full. No matter how much you pour, nothing new can be received. Likewise, only by letting go of some reasoning can the mind have space to welcome truth. Have you ever asked yourself, why do I study so much and life still doesn't change? Why, after dozens of books, hundreds of talks, notebooks full of highlights, a head full of quotes, does my heart still feel heavy, anxious, quick to anger, still as lacking as on the first day? Because we only know how to add, but not how to let go. We keep stuffing in more arguments, knowledge analysis, while the mind is already crammed with fears, doubts, prejudices, and an ego that must always be right. We think add-in equals progress, but in truth that more merely piles onto the old inner mess, making the mind ever heavier and more stifled. To learn something new, the first step is not to seek more, but to clear space. Like wanting fresh wind to rush in, you open a window. You don't build another wall. You cannot welcome light if the room is packed with old things. Likewise, you cannot receive truth if your mind is crowded with old certainties you never re-examine. Letting go doesn't mean throwing away everything you know. It means setting aside the ego that wants to prove itself so you can truly listen. When the mind becomes empty, light, unguarded, free from winning and losing, that's when what is new, deep, and truly needed can enter. Because sometimes growth isn't in learning one more thing, but in daring to release what no longer needs to be held. And the third most essential lesson the Zen master meant to convey, a lesson that seems simple, yet is the hardest to live. True knowledge needs empty space. Emptiness is not stupidity, not meaningless void. emptiness is clear, fresh, and ready to receive. Like a garden preparing for a new season of sowing, the first task isn't adding more soil and fertilizer, but clearing weeds and pulling rotten roots. A mind is the same. Only when it is empty can it receive the new without distortion by old molds. A great mind is not the one that holds the most, but the one that knows how to be most empty when needed. When you are empty, you are no longer bound by the past. Old prejudices, experiences, and personal biases no longer dictate how you see the world. You can see everything as if for the first time with clarity, objectivity, and a primal curiosity. Only then can you truly listen deeply and see clearly. You no longer listen to others in order to rebut, but to understand. You no longer view life through the lens of, I already know, but with the eyes of I am learning anew. You receive truth like catching the first raindrop of the season in your bare hand, without trying to hold it, without rushing to analyze, simply feeling it fully. Only in emptiness do seeds sprout. Only in emptiness does light have room to enter. A mind stuffed full leaves no space for the new. An empty mind becomes fertile ground where each word, each experience, each moment can be planted and grow into real understanding. So if you truly want to mature in wisdom, don't just ask, what else can I learn? Ask yourself, am I empty enough to learn it? In modern society, you're taught to always know, always understand, always be right. From childhood, we were rewarded for correct answers, praised for quick comprehension, celebrated for being the best in the room, the smartest in class. We grew up with a deep belief that not knowing is weakness, that being wrong is failure. We learned to hide confusion, disguise doubt, and act certain even when full of gaps inside. But sometimes what's most needed is the courage to not know, to pause and say, I don't understand yet, to set reasoning aside for a moment to listen instead of rushing to counter, to put down old beliefs and definitions we've clung to so we can see with new eyes as if seeing for the first time. That day, the merchant arrived with a mind crammed full of argument, skepticism, and the urge to conquer truth with logic. But what he needed first wasn't an answer. It was a space where an answer could fall. A mind too full has no room for truth to slip in. Just like a teacup to hold fresh tea, there must be empty space inside. Your mind is the same. You don't need to cram anything more in this moment. No need to memorize one more concept, formula, or lesson. Just be quiet for a bit. Just take one slow breath and let your mind be empty even for a moment. Because when the mind is jammed with argument, judgment, and assertion, then even if truth is heard, you will only argue with it. But when the mind becomes empty, truth doesn't need to persuade you. It simply reveals itself as obvious, like the moon reflected on a still lake, needing no effort, no justification, no reasoning. Then you will realize truth is not something to be argued, but something you perceive when the mind is no longer crowded with contention. Truth doesn't need to win a debate. It only needs to be seen by a mind still as a mirror. That day, the Zen master offered no argument and tried to prove nothing. He simply poured tea, letting silence do what logic could not teach the merchant, the most important lesson of his life, that to receive something new, you must first let your mind become empty. There's a story very close to everyday life that I want to tell you, so close it might have happened in your own home. A story that seems small, but it holds the greatest lesson about love. That day, in a small house tucked by a bamboo grove at the edge of the village, evening was slowly settling in. The last light of day flickered through old wooden lattice windows, casting trembling streaks of honey-colored light across the earthen floor. In the quiet room, the husband sat by the tea table. He wore a coarse cotton shirt worn thin at the shoulders and slowly turned an old clay teapot in his hands, as if turning over the thoughts in his heart. Steam rose from the spout. A thin ribbon of vapor coiled like silk, then dissolved into the still air. The door flew open. The wife stepped in. Her face was flushed, her breath sharp, each step striking the floor. Her eyes flashed with the pent-up sparks of long-held anger. "You have to apologize to me," she almost shouted, her voice shaken. "I've had enough. You must admit you were wrong." The room seemed to tremble with her voice. The air grew dense and heavy, almost tangible. The husband stayed still. No raised brows, no rebuttal, not a word in his defense. He simply tilted the pot and poured tea. Amber liquid flowed from the spout, curling through the air like a silk thread. The first drops touched the bottom of the cup with tiny crackling sounds, soft as rain on an old tile roof. The tea's gentle scent, wood and herbs slowly spread, slipping into every corner of the room like a thin mist settling over the swirling tension. The wife stood there, hands still clenched, but her eyes wavered slightly. The husband didn't look up. He just kept pouring little by little. When the cup was full, he slid it toward her. Not a word. She looked at the cup. The boiling inside her chest began to ease, as if she could hear the steam venting from within herself. The tea's fragrance blended with her breath, soothing the taut lines at her wrists. The room no longer echoed with argument, only the slow ticking of a clock, the soft brushing of bamboo leaves outside the eaves. Then she sat down. No one spoke. The husband kept his gaze on the table, his hand resting lightly beside his own cup. The wife lowered her eyes. Her shoulders loosened, her lips pressed together gently, as if to hold on to the quiet that was entering. Her anger didn't fade because he said something convincing it faded, because he didn't say anything at all. In that silence, she realized, not every hurt needs an apology to be soothed. Sometimes what heals is not reasoning, not justification, but a gentle presence that doesn't resist and doesn't fight to be right. A quiet cup of tea, a quiet man, and an anger that dissolved like tea smoke in the late afternoon. Have you ever been in such a moment? When an argument erupts, emotions surge, and the only thought in your head is they must admit fault. They must say, "I'm sorry." You don't need them to fix it at once, or explain or repay anything. You just need acknowledgement. Just one apology so your anger can settle. And yet the opposite often happens. When you force someone to apologize, they don't perceive their mistake. They only perceive a threat. Their defense springs up like a shield. They push back, rebut, justify, and try to prove they're right, not wrong. So instead of cooling down, the argument flares hotter. The more you push, the farther they retreat. The more you want to win, the less they can yield. Because no one can truly apologize while backed into a corner. When their heart is strung tight as a wire, any apology that slips out is just an escape, not real understanding or remorse. And when you hear an apology that doesn't come from the heart, it not only fails to calm you, it can make your grievance grow. By contrast, When the other person doesn't compete, doesn't resist, doesn't try to prove anything. When they simply sit there quietly, fully present, without defense, that's when your anger begins to dissolve. With nothing to push against, the anger loses the wall it was striking. You no longer feel you must fight, and your body starts to relax. So sometimes what soothes the heart is not a hurried, "I'm sorry," but a silence full of understanding, a pause in which you no longer feel you must win, and the other no longer feels they must defend. When no one is trying to be right, anger finds its own way to settle. Therefore, the first lesson this story leaves us is not every mistake needs a right-wrong battle. We often confuse resolving conflict with winning. We think that if we can prove we're right, the conflict will end, that a sharp argument will halt the other person's anger. But the truth is different when one person wins. The relationship loses. Have you felt that before? You win an argument, the other person goes quiet, no more rebuttal, no more debate. You think you're satisfied, but afterward, as you leave the room, a heavy emptiness rises. Because you didn't just win on points, you lost a piece of the connection between your hearts. The feeling of being right satisfies the ego for a moment, but it leaves quiet cracks in closeness. Sometimes what matters is not who is right, but whether the two of you still love each other. Not every conflict needs a winner and a loser. At times, the most healing thing is not a razor-sharp argument, but a softened glance, a gentle hand, or simply stopping the fight. The second lesson: deep listening matters more than justification. The husband did not react, not because he was weak or lacked reasoning, but because he understood his wife didn't truly need an explanation. She needed to be heard. She needed her feelings acknowledged, and that a silent cup of tea did better than any defense. Notice how when you're angry, you don't actually want the other person to analyze right and wrong. Every argument then feels like oil on the fire. You just need someone to sit beside you to listen with their whole heart, without interrupting, without rebutting, without trying to fix you. Because listening says, "I am here. I respect your feelings. You matter to me more than any argument." And when feelings are acknowledged, anger is like a wind that, having blown itself out, grows quiet, not because it was subdued or defeated, but because it was understood. And the most important lesson: love is bigger than the ego. The ego insists on winning, on being right, on being recognized. Love only needs the other to be at peace. When you truly love someone, you don't need to be above them. Don't need to prove you're more correct, more rational, more insightful. You just need to keep walking forward together. So in the moment, the husband chose silence. He didn't lose, he was protecting love. He chose to place shared happiness above his private ego. And that is what made the wife's anger melt like fog in sunlight. Sometimes winning isn't making someone bow their head. It's helping both of you lift your heads together. In modern life, you and I easily forget this. We live in a world that teaches us to win, to counter sharply, to defend our stance to the end, to always have reasons to be right, to be one step ahead. From school to the office to social media, we're constantly pushed to gain the upper hand in every exchange. We get used to living as if every conversation were a match, every disagreement a battlefield, and our worth were measured by who falls silent first. But here's something few tell you. Love doesn't need logic. Love doesn't need you to win. Love needs presence. It needs ears that can listen. It needs a heart that can yield without defense, without fighting to be right. You don't have to be right in every argument to keep a relationship. You only have to be right in how you love. Because in close relationships, being right doesn't create connection, only understanding does. A justification may win the debate, but a quiet hug is what keeps the other person's heart. And sometimes, the truest way to love is simply to pour a cup of tea in silence. You can try this in your own life. Next time the person you love is angry, instead of rushing to justify, to untangle their every word, try simply being still beside them. No rebuttal, no fighting, no attempt to win. Just sit with them, like the husband sat with the tea that day. You'll see something wondrous. Anger fades, not because you were right, but because you no longer needed to be right. In the moment you stop fighting to win, love gets a chance to speak. And when love speaks, every anger grows small like a drop of water falling into hot tea, vanishing without a trace. If you're in a relationship, remember this deeply. No love survives on victory. Love survives on humility. We often mistake protection of love for always being right, always winning, making the other concede. But love is not a war that needs a winner. Each time you try to prove you're right, you may win the argument, but you lose some tenderness, lose a bit of the safe space the other needs to be themselves. Love doesn't grow from winning. It grows from the moments when two people both bow a little to one another. No bond endures because of logic. Bonds endure because of understanding. You can use logic to break someone's argument, but you cannot use logic to mend a hurting heart. People don't need a winner. They need someone willing to sit down and listen to their feelings, no matter how unreasonable those feelings may seem. It is understanding that draws people close, not razor-sharp reasoning. No heart opens under judgment. Hearts open when they are gently held, and the gentleness is not found in fancy words, but in a moment of silence when you choose love instead of ego. Because in love, what makes someone want to stay is not the sense that you're always right, but the sense that they are always safe beside you. Back then, within the grounds of an ancient mountain temple, there was a young disciple known for his hot temper. He was bright, diligent, and strong-willed, but the moment someone offered even a small criticism, like a spark falling onto dry grass, it would flare into a blaze of rage. That day, during communal work time, a fellow student offered a few gentle comments, but to him, those words felt like a knife. His face flushed red, his jaw clenched, his hands trembled in pulses. His heart pounded in his chest as if urging him to strike back immediately. Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked away, stamping hard on each stone slab every step as if he wanted to grind the path to dust. His eyes blazed the eyes of someone wounded and burning for revenge. He rushed straight to the meditation hall, where the old Zen master sat by the veranda, eyes half-closed, beads slipping through his fingers. "Master," he cried, his voice warped by anger, stretched to its limit. "They humiliated me. I can't take it anymore. What should I do to make them stop?" The master didn't open his eyes. No words of comfort, no taking sides, no quick advice. He simply drew a long, quiet breath, then slowly opened his eyes, his gaze clear like a lake without ripples. He rose slowly, hands clasped behind his back, stepped down from the veranda and walked to the old tree in the temple yard. At its base lay a large, rough boulder, pale green with moss. He turned to the disciple. "Kick it." The disciple froze. "Kick the boulder." "Yes," the master nodded. Though surprised, he did as told. He raised his foot, poured all his anger into the kick, and shouted from his throat as if to expel his pent-up frustration. Thud. A dry cracking sound rang out. A sharp pain shot through his foot. The boulder lay unmoved as if untouched. "Kick it again," the master said calmly. He gritted his teeth and kicked a second time, then a third. Each kick was stronger, angrier, and more painful. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his breath grew ragged, his foot burned as if on fire. The boulder remained motionless in the sun, indifferent to the point of pride. At last, he collapsed, dropping to the ground, hands on his knees gasping. Beads of sweat fell soaking into the fine dust at his feet. Only then did the master step beside him, eyes gentle, voice light as a breeze. "See, you threw everything you had at that rock, but it didn't react, and it was precisely that lack of reaction that made your anger start to fade." He sat down beside the disciple and looked straight into eyes still carrying sparks of rage. "You're the same. When others throw insults at you, you don't need to react. No need to strike back, no need to prove anything, no need to shout to defend yourself. Just stand still, like this boulder." The disciple was silent. His foot still throbbed, but his anger had cooled like ashes after a fire. A light wind passed. The leaves trembled. Sunlight shattered into gold fragments across the courtyard. For the first time, he realized true strength isn't the fastest, fiercest reaction. It's the ability to stand still when the storm rises. And in that moment, in the quiet temple yard, he began to understand why the master hadn't said anything at first. Do you see the depth of that moment? The disciple had believed he had to resist to protect himself, that if he could be angry enough, strong enough, decisive enough, he would never be hurt again. But the more he resisted, the more he hurt. Each kick sent a stab of pain through his foot and did nothing to move the rock. The only thing injured was himself. The boulder did nothing, said nothing, yet remained steady and calm, standing where it was under sun and wind. No need to counterattack. No need to defend. No need to prove its strength. Because real strength doesn't lie in reaction. It lies in inner steadiness. This is what we often forget in modern life. We think that to avoid being hurt, we must strike back faster, speak louder, be tougher. But the truth is, the more we react, the more we're pulled into someone else's storm. The more we fight back, the more we lose our own inner peace. The truly strong person isn't the one who makes others fall silent, but the one who keeps their own silence intact, no matter how loud it is around them. The boulder doesn't need to win it, only needs to stand. And likewise, you don't need to win every confrontation. You only need to be steady enough not to be swayed by them. In today's world, you and I can easily end up like that disciple. One negative comment online, and we plunge into arguments doing everything to protect our honor. A single misunderstanding, and we rush to explain every detail as if our worth will collapse without immediate vindication. One insult, and we explode, raising our voice, tensing up just to prove we're not weak. We mistake reacting for strength. But reacting is actually a sign of losing control. Impulsive reactions usually come from fear. Fear of being belittled, misunderstood, or excluded. And that fear drives us to act rashly, say things we shouldn't do, things we later regret. Have you noticed when your heart is truly at peace, you no longer feel the need to react? You don't need to explain every misunderstanding. Don't need to counter every attack. Don't need to prove anything to feel worthy. Only the insecure feel compelled to react to reassure themselves. The truly strong stand still. They aren't shaken by outside noise because their strength is within a steady heart, no longer dependent on what others think or say. That is true strength, not needing to beat anyone, only not being shaken by anyone. That's the first lesson. Real strength comes from inner steadiness. We often mistake strength for overpowering others' voices, winning debates, or making people go quiet. But the truth is, the opposite strength is not shouting louder than others. It's the ability to be silent without breaking. Strength isn't winning every argument. It's having no need to argue anymore. Like a mountain, it doesn't strain to resist the wind, yet the wind can't move it. And a single jab can make us furious. A casual judgment can crush our spirits. This isn't because the world is too harsh, but because our inner ground isn't yet steady enough to stand still. You can lift weights, eat well, and train your body to handle external loads, but the fiercest storms always come from within. Only a heart steady as stone lets you stand through them. Training the heart doesn't make you cold, it makes you less fragile. When your heart is steady, you don't need to prove, don't need to win, and you aren't swayed by praise or blame. You become a safe place for yourself, and that is real strength. Second lesson. Impulsive reactions solve nothing. When you react in anger, you're not acting, you're exploding, and every explosion leaves wreckage. Have you felt that one rash comment and you lose a good friend? One moment of anger and a once close bond cracks beyond repair. One reckless act and you carry regret for years. Each impulsive reaction feels like solving a problem, but in truth, you're only creating new ones. Anger is like fire. It burns the one who holds it first. The person you mean to burn often walks away, leaving you in the ashes of yourself. By contrast, when you stand still like the boulder, the storm dies on its own. The one who insulted you sees the emptiness of their words, and you remain intact. It's no accident that in meditation, stop is called the first step of wisdom. Only when you stop can you see what's really happening, hear what's moving in your own heart, and act from clarity, not from anger. Third lesson. Steadfastness is the strongest answer. You don't need to shout to be respected. You only need to stand without collapsing. You don't need to rebut to prove you're right. You only need to keep living rightly. Time will answer for you. People may doubt you, criticize you, attack you. But if you stay true to your values, live sincerely each day, and step steadily, then in the end, your silence will carry farther than their noise. Like the boulder, it doesn't say, "I am strong." It simply stands, and its standing is the answer. That is the image of true strength, not noisy, not explosive, not showy, just calm solidity that no storm can shake. This world is full of noise. People compete to speak, to be right, to win. Social media constantly boils with debates. Everyone wants the last word. Everyone wants to prove they are sharper, stronger, more incisive. But what the world needs most is not more voices. It is people who can stand still. People who don't rush to react to every attack. Who don't let emotions drag them into pointless fights. Who aren't swayed by fleeting praise or bitter criticism. People who keep walking steadily through waves, gossip, misunderstandings, and blame. because they understand something deep, real value doesn't need noise to exist. You can be one of those people. You don't need to stand out to be respected. You only need to be steady enough not to be swept away. You don't need to defeat others to prove your strength. You only need not to lose to yourself. Do not let anger, ego, or fear steer you. Next time someone tries to provoke you, remember the boulder. Instead of rushing to react, stand still. Not still because you're weak, but because you're strong enough not to be dragged away. Not still out of helplessness, but because you understand every storm passes and you remain whole. And in that stillness, you will find something more precious than victory, a peace no one can take from you. That is not only strength, it is freedom. Because when the world no longer pulls you with every wave, you finally take the helm of your own boat. One day, a young soldier returned from the battlefield. The armor on his body was still dusty, the scratches blotched like wounds that hadn't yet closed. His hair was matted from sweat and wind, and his eyes shone with a cold light, the light of someone who had lived too long on the line between life and death, where a single slow blink could cost a life. He stepped through the old wooden gate of a Zen temple hidden in the valley. The gate creaked open, and inside everything was strangely quiet. No shouting, no clash of weapons, only the wind threading through the pines and the soft chime of a wind bell. The silence slowed the soldier's steps, as if each one were falling into another world, far from the noise he knew so well. He stopped before the meditation hall where an old Zen master sat by the veranda. His hair was white like morning mist, his figure thin but steady like an ancient pine rooted in stone. The master's eyes were half closed, his breath, even as if nothing in the world could disturb the one sitting before the soldier. The soldier bowed, then sat facing him. His hand still gripped the sword hilt without him realizing it. That hand was used to clenching tight, used to holding a weapon, as if letting go would make him disappear. He looked up, met the master's eyes, and spoke in a hoarse voice, heavy as if it carried the clatter of steel from battles not yet far behind master. In the end, which side will win? A light breeze passed, stirring a few dry leaves on the courtyard. The Zen master did not answer. He opened his eyes clear as the water of an old well and looked deep into the soldier. The look did not probe or judge, yet seemed to pass through the chipped armor, through the wounds, through the hard shell the soldier had worn for too long. That gaze made the soldier pause without meaning to. For the first time in months, his hand loosened slightly on the sword. No one spoke. The space between them seemed to solidify so still that the soldier could hear his own heartbeat heavy and fast, like an animal cornered. The master kept looking at him. Then he spoke slowly, each word falling like drops of water into a still pond. The one who no longer wants to win. The short sentence echoed like a bell through the valley. The soldier frowned. He waited for an explanation, a strategy, a clear answer about which side would win, who was strong, who was weak, and what he should do to gain the advantage. But the master said nothing more. He only turned his gaze toward the garden, where a few butterflies flitted over clumps of yellow chrysanthemums carefree, as if war had never existed. The soldier looked there, then back at his own hands. They were trembling not from anger, but from emptiness. He suddenly realized He had been so used to needing to win that he no longer remembered what he had lost with each victory. He had taken land-seized flags, earned renown, but each night in restless sleep, he still saw the faces of the fallen, those he had called enemies, who had also been living beings like him, who knew how to laugh, to cry, to dream of a home. Suddenly, the master's sentence touched a hidden place inside him that he had locked for years. The one who no longer wants to win. Could that be the real victory? When you no longer have to be above anyone, no longer live in fear of losing, no longer trade your peace for brief laughter over ruins. The soldier looked up. The master had closed his eyes again, his hands resting lightly on his knees as if the conversation had ended long ago. But for the soldier, something had just begun. He stood bowed deeply and turned to go step by slow step. The sword hilt at his side still swung, but his hand no longer gripped it. With each step, the mud underfoot seemed softer, the sky wider, and in his chest, for the first time in months, there was a gentle, quiet space, without the urge to win. Do you see just one sentence yet enough to make the sword in the soldier's heart fall away? All that time he had believed the answer lay outside this side, or that ours or theirs, righteous or evil. He believed that if he could decide who was right and who was wrong, his heart would be at ease again. But the master did not answer with a winning side. He looked through the armor, through the logic and pride, and pointed to the deepest place inside him, where waves still rose, where the craving to win still pulsed like the need to breathe. Because in truth, what made him suffer was not the war out there, but the quiet war within the ego that never accepts defeat. And the master reminded him, the one who no longer wants to win is the one who truly wins. Because as long as you want to win, you are still living by others, using them as measures, opponents' proof of your worth. But when you no longer want to win, you are no longer bound to anyone to define yourself. Then you need not be above anyone, and you cannot be below anyone, because you have stepped out of the race. That is the greatest victory, not conquering others, but conquering the need to win within yourself. Are you also carrying a quiet war inside, not a battlefield of swords and smoke, but arguments, rivalries, the silent fights in your mind where you must be better than someone, more right, than someone kinder, than someone to feel worthy? From very young, we are taught that victory is everything. Top of the class to be praised. Win the prize to feel proud. Rise above others to be worthy. So we grow up seeing life as a battlefield where everyone around us is an opponent to surpass, and then we burn out. Have you felt that? Always tense, always on guard, always straining to prove you're good, yet inside still empty, still uneasy, unsure who you are if you're no longer fighting. Because when you must constantly fight to prove your worth, the journey itself quietly says, right now, I am not enough. That is exactly what the soldier was living. He had won many battles, been cheered, recognized, but had never known peace. Victory does not automatically bring peace, especially when the true war is still smoldering inside. The first lesson of this story is peace does not come from victory. Victory only ends a fight, but it does not end the desire to fight. You may defeat the person before you, but if your heart still smolders with resentment, still wants to prove you're above, you are not at peace. You may take the highest seat, be honored and applauded. But if your heart still fears being toppled, you are still living on a battlefield, only now that field has moved from outside into your mind. Peace is not when no one contends with you, but when you no longer want to contend with anyone. Like a lake, it doesn't need to defeat the wind. It only needs not to ripple with it. When the lake is still, the wind passes, and the water remains clear as before. Likewise, when your heart is still, every attack passes like wind, and you remain whole. Second lesson. Letting go of winning and losing is true freedom. As long as you want to win, you are tied to the game of more or less. You won't dare fail, won't dare be wrong, won't dare stop, afraid others will get ahead. So you don't live for yourself, you live to beat others. Have you seen yourself there? Waking each day, not to savor life, but to keep running in a race with no finish line where no one truly wins. Some are only more exhausted than others. But you don't have to keep running. You can step off the track. And when you stop, you'll see the wide sky isn't reserved for the one who finishes first. It belongs to anyone who stops to look up. Freedom isn't at the finish line. It's in the moment you dare not to need a finish line anymore. And the final lesson, defeating others is not as great as defeating yourself. The soldier thought victory meant beating the enemy, but the greatest enemy is always within: pride, fear, competitiveness, the ego that won't let go. You can defeat hundreds, but if you cannot defeat yourself, you are still the loser. But if you win over your anger, over your fear, over the stubborn need to be above, then even if no one knows your name, you are the greatest victor. True victory is not stepping on others to stand taller, but lowering the ego within to stand in peace among people. The modern world keeps pushing you and me into races for money, fame, beauty, intellect. From very young, we're taught to hurry, to surge ahead, to be better than others, to be worthy. So we rush non-stop, eyes fixed on the goal, heart squeezed by pressure mines, always taut like strings. But the truth is, the most important race is not who runs faster, but who can stop first. Stop so you no longer need to win. Stop so you no longer see others as opponents. Stop to live lightly, no longer dragged by the ego that always wants more. Because have you noticed, the more we want to be above, the more we burn out. The more we compare, the more uneasy the heart. The more we run, the farther we are from ourselves. Victory only makes the mountain higher, but also makes the loneliness deeper. The one who no longer wants to win is the one who has finally won everything, because nothing binds them anymore. Not praise or blame, not the fear of losing, not the ego that demands recognition. They don't need to prove their worth, because they know they were already enough. Next time you're pulled into an argument when your chest burns to prove you're right, remember the soldier and the master's answer, the one who no longer wants to win. Not needing to win doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're strong enough not to need to prove it anymore. Not needing to win doesn't mean you've lost it. It means you've chosen peace over hatred. And precisely when you set down the sword, you can open your hands to embrace the world with your whole heart, a heart that carries no weapons, only peace. Back then, in the grounds of an ancient temple nestled halfway up a mountain, there was a young man who often came to see an old Zen master. He came in the early mornings when mist still hung over the mossy tiles and the temple bell still resonated in the quiet air. Each time he walked quickly along the stone path covered in dry leaves, as if racing against time itself, against the nameless unease in his own heart. He knelt before the Zen master eye's tense voice, urgent like someone who had just run through a storm. "Master, am I good? Am I doing well? Am I going the right way?" The Zen master merely lifted his eyes to him, a smile light as passing clouds, then lowered his gaze and went on, picking up the dry leaves scattered across the ancient stone steps. Every time it was the same. No answer. No praise, no criticism, no affirmation, and no denial. Only a silence like a rippleless lake, and a calm smile that seemed to have witnessed countless lives coming and going. But the young man didn't give up. The next week he came again, and the week after that. Each time the questions were the same, only his voice grew more anxious, tinged with a little desperation. "Please, tell me, am I doing well? Am I going the right way?" The Zen master still only smiled, not a word in reply. Until one late spring morning, when sunlight slipped through the bamboo and laid soft golden bands across the courtyard, the young man came again, his face haggard as if he'd lost many nights of sleep. He knelt this time, not looking into the master's eyes, but down at the cold stone floor, his voice hoarse. "Master, I don't know who I am without an answer. Please, just tell me. Am I good?" The Zen master was silent for a long time. Then, without speaking, he gently raised his hand and pointed toward the temple veranda. The young man looked up, confused. There, under the thin silken sunlight, was a small flower, a wild flower, pale purple, growing from a crack in the stone beside the step. It was not striking, not as dazzling as the peonies in the garden, not as fragrant as the orchids someone had offered in the main hall. Just a small flower, fragile, seeming as if it could vanish with a strong gust of wind. The young man looked at the flower for a long time, waiting for something special to happen. But nothing did. No miraculous light shone from its petals. No celestial music sounded like in old tales. It was simply blooming. Blooming quietly, needing no one to know. No one to praise, no confirmation that it was beautiful or worthy. Not trying to become anything else. Not trying to be on the right path. Not trying to be good. It simply bloomed. The Zen master didn't say a word. He just stood there, his gentle gaze as if it had answered all the questions that had never been answered. The young man still knelt, but his heart suddenly softened. He realized he had been tirelessly chasing a stamp of approval, as if his worth existed only when someone certified it. He had been living like an endless competition, always needing a scorecard, a prize, an invisible round of applause from others' eyes. But that flower needed none of that, and it still bloomed. No need to prove, no need to be acknowledged. Just living fully the moment it was born, blooming with all it had in that moment. A light breeze moved across the veranda, and the petals quivered. And for the first time in many days, the young man smiled a smile so light that even he was surprised. Light like that flower. Light as if, for the first time in his life, he no longer had to strain to be worthy. The Zen master still said nothing. He simply bent down to pick up another dry leaf, as if nothing important had just happened. But the young man knew in that very silence he had received the answer he had sought for so long, an answer without words yet louder than any words. You don't need to become anything else. You only need to bloom as yourself. The master's answer was wordless, yet strong enough to break the vicious circle of craving recognition. Because true worth does not lie in praise. True worth lies in whether you are living true to yourself. Have you ever paused to ask yourself this? Each day, what are you living for your own life or for others' eyes? We grow up in a society that constantly values people by external measures, grades, degrees, titles, follower counts, compliments. Gradually, we begin to believe that if we aren't recognized, we are nothing. So we run. We run after beauty to be called pretty. We run after money to be called capable. We run after achievements to be called successful. We run after fame to be noticed, to be applauded. But do you see the danger in that? When you live for recognition, your worth no longer lies within you. It lies in others' hands, which means the moment they turn away, you collapse. You may do very well today, but if no one praises you, you immediately feel useless. You may reach a great achievement, but if no one applauds, you feel it's meaningless. You may live a sincere life, but if no one acknowledges you, you doubt yourself. That's why the more recognition we get, the more we fear losing it. The more praise we receive, the more we fear criticism. The more attention we get, the more we fear being forgotten. And in that way, we are no longer free. We become puppets pulled by others' eyes. You see, that's the loop the young man was trapped in. He wasn't living to live. He was living to be told he was worthy. And that made him weary and confused, even though he had tried harder than many. The Zen master didn't answer, because he knew any affirmation would be only a temporary painkiller. It wouldn't heal the deep emptiness within. What the young man needed wasn't applause, but stillness. To remember true worth doesn't come from how others see you. It comes from whether you are living true to yourself. So if you too are tirelessly chasing recognition, pause for a moment. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, if no one applauds, do I still want to live this life this way? If the answer is yes, then you no longer need anyone's confirmation, because the way you are living is already the clearest proof of your worth. Worth does not come from praise. You don't suddenly become less valuable because someone fails to acknowledge you. And you don't truly become more valuable because someone praises you. We often forget this simple thing. From childhood, we were taught to do something to be praised, get high grades to be called smart, win awards to be called talented, make a lot of money to be called successful. Little by little, we start fastening our worth to others' mouths, as if each compliment were a puzzle piece defining who we are. But the truth is, worth doesn't live in others' mouths. It lives in every breath you take and each small thing you do with your whole heart. You might receive no applause, but if you live kindly, care for your family, work sincerely, and walk through life with straight steps, then you already have worth with no need to prove it. A flower doesn't need anyone to name it to be a flower. It only needs to bloom, and that blooming is enough to soften the whole sky. You are the same. You don't need to become a perfect copy of anyone. You don't need to keep pace with others' speed or fulfill every expectation the world lays on you. What's most precious isn't reaching outside standards, but keeping the truth inside. Because achievement isn't standing on some peak for others to look up at, but living each day true to what you believe, even if no one sees it, even if no one praises it. Achievement isn't making the world recognize you. but lying down each night, knowing you didn't betray yourself that day? Have you noticed the people you truly respect are rarely the loud ones who boast of accomplishments, but the quiet ones whose every action shows completeness? They don't need to be called excellent because they know they are living honestly, and that is what makes them worthy. Everyone blooms in their own way. You don't need to bloom like someone else. You don't need someone else's season. You don't need the same color, shape, or speed. Some bloom very early, then fade quickly. Some quietly ready the bud for a long time, then bloom once brilliantly. But all are flowers, and none is meaningless, just because it is different. This world doesn't need you to be like anyone else. It only needs you to dare to be yourself, even if different, even if slower, even if there's no applause. Because a flower doesn't bloom to be recognized. It blooms because that is its nature, and you are the same. You don't live to be recognized. You live because you are life. Your worth has never depended on others' eyes. It already lives in every heartbeat, every smile, every moment you live fully as yourself. I know, sometimes it's hard not to seek recognition, because you and I live in a modern world where everything has a metric, and those metrics are sharper than ever, present everywhere. Likes, shares, followers, rankings, awards, certificates, titles. They surround us like an invisible panel of judges, constantly scoring every step, every word, every decision. With just a moment of less attention, we instantly feel small. If no one taps, like we suddenly doubt our own worth. So without anyone pushing us, we start to run. Run to impress. Run to prove we're good enough. Run so we won't be left behind. And in that noisy race, we slowly forget one thing. We are not numbers. You are not likes, rankings, medals, or flattering comments. You are a human being, breathing, loving, walking through this life with very real steps. You may not have reached the standards the world cheers for, but that doesn't make you any less precious. Because true worth doesn't lie in others' eyes, it lies in how you live each day. As long as each day you live truthfully, kindly, fully as yourself, then even if no one knows, it is still a worthy life. Worth doesn't need announcements. It shines on its own through the smallest acts, a gentle hug, a moment of listening without judgment, a tear that falls for someone else. Next time you feel the need for someone's recognition, when your heart frantically longs to hear you're great to steady itself, remember the flower by the temple veranda. No one praises it. No one writes songs for it. No one photographs it for social media. Yet it quietly blooms, because it doesn't bloom for applause. It blooms because that is its nature. You are the same. You don't need to ask, am I good? You don't need to live as if you're on a stage, always dazzling, always outstanding, always applauded. You only need to live quietly, live true to yourself, and let your life answer in place of every recognition. Because true worth doesn't lie in applause. True worth lies in whether you dare to be yourself in a world that keeps trying to make you the same as everyone else. And if you can do that, if amid all the noise and pressure to conform, you still keep your own rhythm, still live with your own heart, then even if no one sees, even if no one acknowledges you, you are still a flower in bloom. And that is something profoundly precious. That noon, the edge of the forest was steeped in a rare calm. Sunlight like honey gently poured onto ground, still wet with the morning's dew. Early summer winds slipped through the tree canopies, lightly stirring the leaves into a soft rustling, like an ancient lullaby of earth and sky. The Buddha and his disciples were resting on a smooth patch of grass beneath an old sal tree. No one spoke. They simply sat there, quiet at ease. A few small birds chirped somewhere above, and now and then tilted their heads to look down, as if curious about the strange peace radiating from the group below. The air was so still, it seemed you could hear the grass grow. Until hurried footsteps shattered it all. From afar, a man came rushing toward them. His clothes were disheveled and smeared with mud, his hair wild as if he had just wrenched himself from a nightmare. Sweat streamed down his brow, his breath ragged like a hunted animal's. Every footfall thudded on the earth like a war drum, sending the birds shooting up from the branches. He ran and shouted, his voice hoarse. Has anyone seen my cows? They're gone. All of them are gone. My God, I'm finished. The disciples looked at him, but no one spoke. The farmer stumbled closer, his breath broken like a saw with missing teeth. His eyes were bloodshot, his gaze frantic like a man at the edge of a cliff. I only looked away for a moment. Just a moment. He stammered, clutching his head, his whole body trembling. And then they vanished, one by one. My whole herd. I'm ruined. I don't know how to live without them. His words fell out like shards, sharp and chaotic. The once quiet air now felt thick with his panic. No one in the group replied. No curious glances, no words of pity. Only calm faces quietly watching him, the way you'd watch a storm rise in a blue sky. The farmer looked around, hoping someone would stand up to help him run to search point out the direction the herd had fled. But no one moved. He shouted a few more lines, his voice now splintering in the wind. Then his legs seemed to lose all strength. He stood still for a moment, then turned and dragged himself away. No more yelling, only his hunched back swaying like a tree broken by a storm, slowly disappearing among the rows of trees. A long while after his figure had vanished, the forest regained its original stillness. Birds chirped again. The wind caressed the leaves. The disciples' steady breathing seemed to blend into the air light as incense smoke. Only then did the Buddha smile faintly. He did not look in the direction the farmer had gone, but at the disciples' faces still unsettled. His voice was low, gentle as a breeze. Do you see? How fortunate we are to have nothing to lose. The words fell into the space like a quiet drop of water onto a still lake. They did not break the surface, but they set off ripples in each person's heart. The disciples looked at one another. No one spoke, but in their eyes, something had just unknotted. An invisible tension seemed to melt away. They suddenly felt lighter. And in that honey gold noon in the silent forest, each asked inwardly, how many cows am I holding in my heart? Things that if lost I believe would make me collapse like that man. No one answered. Only the wind slipped softly through the leaves, as if whispering, how fortunate. If you learn not to cling, then nothing in this world can take your peace away. A very gentle sentence, yet it holds a truth heavy as a mountain. Suffering comes from attachment. That farmer wasn't truly hurting because he lost cows. He was hurting because in his mind, he had identified himself with that herd. The cows weren't just four-legged animals for him. They were a lifetime of labor, years of savings, a symbol of status, proof of his worth in the eyes of the village, the recognition he had proudly held tight in his heart. So when they vanished, he didn't just lose a few animals, he lost the very image he believed was himself. That's why his pain was so deep, like his whole inner world collapsed in an instant. Have you ever been like that farmer? Have you ever fused your self-worth to something outside yourself? A splendid house, a coveted job, a relationship. You were proud of a bank account growing thicker, or a perfect image you painstakingly built for others to admire. You may have told yourself, I am successful. I am wealthy. I have a happy family. I am well loved. And then when one of those wavered, when the job was lost, money dwindled, a relationship cracked, or the glow around you faded, you felt as if you had fallen apart with nothing left. Not just losing something external, but losing the entire sense of who I am that you had clung to. But the truth is, you are not what you own. You are not what you accumulate. You are not what others think of you. You are the one sitting here breathing, witnessing all those things come and go. You are the life that is happening, not the objects that life happens to hold for a stretch of the road. Houses, money, fame, image, they're only passing clouds drifting across the sky of your life. They may be beautiful, even radiant, but they are not the sky. So whenever you cling to something outside to define yourself, you bind yourself to suffering. Because anything that can be lost sooner or later will carry away a piece of you if you've mistaken yourself for it. Then you live in constant fear. Fear of losing. Fear of lack, fear that you won't be yourself if those things slip away. But if you release attachment, if you remember that your value doesn't lie in what you possess, but in the living presence, breathing in this very moment, you'll see. No matter what you lose, you remain whole. Because you were never those things. You are the one smiling as you watch them come and go, light as clouds crossing the sky. Suffering comes from attachment. It isn't loss itself that hurts you, but the belief I lost myself when something leaves your hands. When you glue your heart to possessions, reputation, relationships, you unconsciously place your peace on things that are fragile and impermanent. Then, you live in a constant state of fear. Fear that money will shrink tomorrow. Fear that your reputation will crumble. Fear your loved one will leave. Fear that some sudden event will take everything. Those things aren't wrong, but when you identify with them, you've set your soul on a rocking boat in choppy waters. A light breeze is enough to unsettle you. A small change can make you feel shattered. But if you see things as they are, just arrivals and departures along life's road, you won't be dragged by them. Like a rain shower, you can enjoy it when it comes, but you don't cling when it goes. The rain can refresh the garden, but you don't try to lock it in your hand. The modern world teaches you to have more money, more stuff, more fame, more influence. But the more you have, the more you must protect. And the more you protect, the more fear tightens your heart. Have you noticed? When you have too much, you stop enjoying it and live only in fear of losing it. Afraid of losing your job, afraid of losing your image, afraid of losing status, afraid of losing love. You live as if guarding a fragile treasure, always watchful, always tense, always uneasy. By contrast, the less one owns, the more unburdened the heart. The fewer things to guard, the fewer fears. The less to cling to, the freer you are. You no longer need to guard or brace because there's nothing left to lose. That's why the Buddha smiled and said, "How fortunate we are to have nothing to lose. With nothing to lose, nothing can bind the heart." Freedom isn't having everything. It's not being bound by anything. Letting go is the greatest freedom. And letting go isn't abandoning. It's not allowing your heart to be shackled by what you have. You can still work, love, care, build. But don't identify yourself with the outcomes. Don't let failure make you feel worthless, and don't let success make you think you're invincible. Love as if one day you may have to let go. Work as if one day you may have to start again. Live as if you own nothing, only temporarily entrusted with a few things on this short journey. Because everything will change, only a non-clinging heart won't be swept away by change. Only when you release are you truly free. Free from fear of loss, free from the chains of ego, free to live each moment as it is. Today's world never stops praising those who hold a lot. People admire those with much money, land, property, connections, power, influence. From childhood, we're taught that the more we accumulate, the safer we are. The more we hold, the happier we'll be. So we rush into an endless race to gather wealth, fame, compliments, even the admiring looks of others. But have you ever asked, why does having more often bring more unease? Why do those who hold the most toss and turn at night, while those with little can sleep soundly by the porch of a small home? Because the more you grip, the more you fear losing. That fear gnaws at your peace every day, whether you notice or not. You stop enjoying what you have and live only to protect it from loss. You grow wary of people around you, afraid someone will pass you, afraid times will change, afraid a sudden twist will sweep away all your gains. You end up living not as someone enjoying life, but as a warehouse guard, always vigilant, always anxious, always on edge. Meanwhile, the beauty of the one who dares to release is often dismissed, even mistaken for weakness or giving up. But the truth is the opposite. Those who dare to let go do not do so because they cannot hold, but because they understand that everything that comes will one day go, while their true self, the deep quiet part within, remains. Still peaceful, still free, still whole, no matter how the world turns. Like a person sitting by a temple veranda, quietly watching clouds cross the sky, not trying to keep them, not fearing their departure, just smiling and continuing to breathe. That person neither rejects the cloud nor clings to it. They understand its coming is a gift, and its going is part of life's nature. You can live like that too. You don't have to throw everything away, leave the world, or deny what you have. You only need to release the thought, I must have these to be happy. True happiness doesn't lie in what you possess, but in being light even when those things are gone. That is real freedom. Next time something leaves your life, a sum of money, a job, a relationship, an opportunity, a position you once clung to, instead of panicking, instead of tormenting yourself, try sitting down, take a deep breath, and remember the farmer of old and his lost cows. Remember his despair, and remember the Buddha's light smile as he said, "How fortunate we are to have nothing to lose." You can be like that too. Not because you have nothing, but because you no longer let your heart be bound by anything. And when your heart is no longer bound, you'll realize something profound. Freedom doesn't come from having a lot, but from not fearing loss. Only when you no longer fear loss can you truly enjoy what you have lightly, without gripping, without panic, without straining to keep it. You're no longer a treasure guard, but a person walking freely through life with open hands and a heart as light as air. Once upon a time, in a small village tucked along a hillside, there lived a carpenter known throughout the region. Villagers said that wood in his hands seemed to awaken. A rough block set on the plane after a few chisel strikes, and a few soft passes of the plane would reveal the form of a sturdy table. A dry trunk, heavy with the scent of resin through precise joinery, would become a lute that sounded as clear as spring water. Even stubborn planks, once mortised and tenoned, suddenly fit so tightly, people thought they'd been born to be together from the very beginning. He spoke little, was lean with deep-set eyes and hands calloused in ridges like a tree's growth rings. Good news travels far. One day, a royal messenger rode into the village through a swirl of dust carrying the king's decree. The king had heard of the carpenter's skill and invited him to court. On the appointed day, he put on a clean garment, tied back his silver hair, and walked through long stone corridors, his heart both proud and slightly trembling. In the great hall, light fell from tall windows and reflected off embroidered hangings, bathing the room in a dusky golden glow. The king looked at him, his voice deep yet resonant. "I want you to make me a truly beautiful throne. A throne not only to sit upon, but to embody the majesty and greatness of this dynasty." The carpenter bowed low. His heart thudded fast in his chest. This was the greatest chance of his life. If he succeeded, his name might be etched into the royal rolls, his fame spreading to the four corners. Yet for that very reason, something unseen within him began to tighten pressure, expectation, and fear of failure. At dawn the next day, he was already at his workshop. It was a broad open space with a low-tiled roof where the scents of sawdust and resin blended into something so familiar it warmed anyone who stepped inside. Chisels hung on the wall gouges, paring chisels' edges keen as knives alongside planes, saws, squares, a compass, and a chalk line. Early light slipped through a crack in the door and fell across drifting motes of dust like fireflies out past their hour. He began by choosing wood. Not every kind of wood had the right to become a king's throne. He walked along the store, laid his hand on each log, listened to the faint low sound when he tapped. The grain inhaled the resin lingering in the heartwood and studied the lines like little rivers flowing across the cross-section. At last, he chose the best blocks, dense grain, straight yet lively figure, strong but not brittle, measure, chalk lines, rough out the blanks. Saw teeth sang in steady strokes, the plane hummed like distant rain. He calculated every detail, how much to curve the armrests so they'd be both dignified and comfortable, how high to set the back so the king's robe wouldn't wrinkle, where to place the dragon and cloud motifs so they would adorn without overwhelming the whole. He was meticulous down to each concealed mortise and tenon and hidden wooden peg, day after day. The sun rose and set. Light moved across the workshop floor like a gigantic clock. He lost count of how many plane irons he sharpened, how many chisel edges he replaced. Each evening when he stopped, pieces of wood lay scattered like puzzle parts waiting to be fitted into a worthy whole. Then, one afternoon, with nearly every component shaped, he stepped back a few paces to see the whole. The throne emerged harmonious lines, tight joints, exquisite carving. The apprentice beside him couldn't hide the gleam in his eyes, but the carpenter fell silent. A deep crease formed on his brow. He stepped forward, touched an edge, ran his fingers along a curve, examined a motif closely. Not perfect enough, he murmured. That night he couldn't sleep. Wind slipped through the door's cracks, sounding like his thoughts scraping against themselves. Near dawn, he lit a fire. One by one, the well-shaped pieces, carefully carved components, he set them into the furnace. Flames leapt up and swallowed his sweat, toil, and hopes. Ashes rose and caught in his hair like streaks of silver. The next day he began again. The second time. He told himself this time would be different. This time he would see what was missing. He chose wood again, measured again, chiseled again, planed again, did trial assemblies again, then stepped back and squinted until his whole body ached. But at the final moment, when everything seemed to be at the threshold, the old sentence returned. Not perfect enough. The fire was lit again. For the second time, the throne became ash. Then came a third time. Each beginning, his resolve shone like a blade. Each ending, his disappointment sank like a stone to the bottom of a well. The villagers whispered what exactly was that master carpenter pursuing. The apprentice looked at him with mingled awe and fear. Why would something so beautiful still be thrown into the fire? So it went until a sweltering noon, when the sun stood overhead and cicadas droned like a heavy curtain over the roof tiles. Hoofbeats stopped at the workshop door. The king's retinue appeared, armor gleaming. The door opened and the king entered. The air seemed to contract, leaving only the thick smell of soot. Inside, where the nearly finished throne should have been, there were only mounds of black ash. Fresh timbers were stacked in a corner, still fragrant with resin, as if awaiting a summons. On the bench, tools lay still, the plain iron polished from use, chisels sharp but weary. The king surveyed the scene. The gaze of a sovereign passed over the blackened streaks and settled on the carpenter's calloused hands. There was no outburst of anger, but a gravity that couldn't be concealed. "Why can't you complete it?" the king asked, his voice not loud but as heavy as a stone set upon still water. The workshop was silent. The apprentice swallowed hard. The cicadas outside seemed to recede. The carpenter stood motionless for a long time. He didn't dare meet the king's eyes. He saw the sleepless nights, the flames warped pieces, satin-smooth plane shavings, dragon and cloud carvings rising and vanishing in his mind. He saw his own face in the dim bronze mirror in the corner, tired, pensive, afraid. At last he bowed his head. His voice turned hoarse like an old door. "Because I don't yet have the drawing in my heart. I've only been carving wood without truly knowing what I want to create." As the words fell, the workshop seemed to grow lighter by a notch. Something broke, not wood, but a long-standing fog. The apprentice looked at him, understanding, and not yet daring to. The king was silent, as if weighing something deeper than a throne. Outside, sunlight fell like gold dust. A breeze blew in, lifting curls of sawdust like a small shower. In that shower, the carpenter saw more clearly a simple truth he had long avoided. He had used all the strength of his hands, but had never sat quietly to ask his heart what the king's throne within his own vision should look like, what spirit it should carry, what kind of soul it should have. He had plunged into carving like a diligent craftsman, but had never been the architect of his own work. The wood listened to him, but he had not yet listened to the voice within. The king did not scold. He regarded him for a long moment, then turned to go telling his attendants not to add pressure. Only when the king's figure disappeared behind the trees in the courtyard did the carpenter dare to sigh. The breath lifted from his chest like a heavy log. Evening fell very slowly. He sat alone in the workshop, surrounded by the smells of ash resin and sunlight. The hammering, planing, and sawing seemed to echo somewhere in memory. He laid his calloused hands on his knees and kept them still for a long time. For the first time in months, he didn't touch a single tool. He sat as someone listening for a very soft music rising from the wood or from his own heart. What is the drawing in the heart? The question stood before him, so clear he couldn't turn away. Was it an image already present, a whole so defined that every detail knows its place? Or was it a felt sense of the throne's spirit commanding without ostentation, severe in line but not rigid? He closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his eyelids, curves, edges, proportions, heights, and depths seemed to appear not fully formed, but already faintly lit. That night, he didn't light a fire. He didn't take up a chisel. He simply sat until night deepened, the moon rose, and slipped across the window like a drop of milk. In the night sounds, he understood why all those nearly finished thrones turned to ash. He had chased a vague feeling of perfection to fill the void left by an unborn vision. He tried to fix small flaws when what was missing was the largest thing, the whole form in his heart. At dawn, when the apprentice arrived, he found the master seated before a blank board with charcoal and a rule in front of him. The master nodded slightly and lifted the charcoal. The first lines were very slow, like someone feeling for a path. Gradually, his hand flowed more freely. A shape emerged on the board, a back with just enough curve to support. Armrests opening like two welcoming arms. Legs solid, but not heavy. Motifs placed exactly where they should be, stopping exactly when they should. Not a single stroke extra. He said nothing. The apprentice watched, trembling with a strange emotion. He had never seen his master draw a plan like this. Not a set of dry proportions, but a soul being revealed. But the story of the throne from our vantage ends right where it should. At that confession, at the moment, the carpenter faced what was missing and named it. He told the king and himself, "I don't yet have the drawing in my heart. I've only been carving wood, without truly knowing what I want to create." Those words sound light as sawdust, yet weigh like an ironwood beam in both hands. They explain why effort never took shape, why perfection kept retreating a step, why flames kept rising at the last minute. They also open the door to something else once the drawing in the heart appears. Every chisel stroke has a destination. Every pass of the plane knows where to stop, and each piece of wood finds its place within a meaningful whole. That day, the village outside was still lively, children running, peddlers calling, dogs barking idly. In the workshop, the carpenter set down the charcoal, lifted his face, and exhaled a long breath. The doors stood open, welcoming a strip of morning light that fell right across the board with its sketch lines. The light made the charcoal lines stand out like a small but certain answer to the months that had turned to ash. And the king, he would either get the throne he desired, or he would wait a while longer. that lies beyond this telling. What belongs to us is the moment the carpenter recognized the crux skilled hands are a blessing, but without a drawing in the heart, craft becomes flailing. A mound of effort high as sawdust can wait for a single spark and turn into a heap of black ash. Do you see a single admission lit up the silent workshop? One sentence solved the riddle of 3 fires. One moment drew near what had seemed far away. And there the story closes, not with the cheers of a completed work, but with the quiet breath of a craftsman who has found what matters most, the drawing in his heart. From here on, every chisel stroke truly has a path. Every piece of wood has a reason to remain, and any fire, if it rises, will be only to warm, not to burn down dreams. I tell you this carpenter's story because in today's world, so many of us are living as he did. Have you ever felt like this? Each day you open your eyes and hurl yourself into an endless to-do list. You're so busy, you don't eat on time, don't sleep enough, don't take a slow breath or look up at the sky. You pour yourself into becoming better, earning more, climbing higher, proving to the world that you're worthy, that you're not less than anyone, that you're headed the right way. But then, on a very quiet night when the outside noise has settled, you lie in bed, stare at the dim ceiling, and suddenly a question rings in your mind. All of this, what is it for? It's a frightening question, but also the most honest your heart has ever whispered. Because in that moment, you realize you've been so busy, you haven't had time to ask where you're going. Like that carpenter, you carve away day after day. But have you ever stopped to ask, what does the throne of my life look like? We live in a society that worships speed. From young on, you were taught to move faster than others, to grab opportunities before someone else's hand reaches them. We've been trained to accelerate, but no one taught us to pause and check our direction. People cheer you on to do more, achieve more, become more. But few remind you if you're headed the wrong way. The faster you go, the farther you get from what truly matters. Have you seen someone work themselves ragged for 10 years, then one day look back and realize what they built isn't the life they wanted, but a gilded cage for their own soul? Have you known someone who made a lot of money, yet their eyes show only fatigue and emptiness? Some climb to the peak of their careers, and standing there feel not joy, but cold loneliness. Because success isn't about how high you climb. It's about whether you're climbing the right mountain. A person can be very busy, very diligent, and still not move any closer to what truly makes them happy. Like a boat that sets out without a chart, no matter how hard it rows, it just drifts on the vast sea of life, circling waves, never reaching shore. Worse still, the farther you go, the more time and effort you invest, the harder it becomes to stop. You tell yourself just a little more, but the more you push, the deeper you go down a path that isn't yours. You're afraid to stop thinking. Stopping is failure, but in truth, continuing in the wrong direction is the greater failure. We often don't dare stop for fear of losing momentum, but only when you stop can you see where you're heading. Only when you stop can you turn inward and open the most important map, the map of your own heart. If you don't know the destination, then all effort, no matter how beautiful, is just shapeless carving, bound to end in ashes like the carpenter's thrones. You might be going very fast, But fast doesn't mean right. You might be doing a lot, but a lot doesn't mean meaningful. And the world may be applauding, but if your heart is empty, all that clapping is only echoes in a cold theater. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't to take another step, but to stop. Sit down in the middle of the race and ask, what does the throne of my life look like? If you don't know where you want to go, all striving is just a loop with no exit. But if you do know, then each step, however slow, brings you closer to true happiness. So give yourself a quiet space, a moment with no social media, no deadlines, no pressure, just you. And the honest question, how do I truly want to live? That answer is the drawing in your heart. Only with it will your efforts not turn meaningless. Without direction, effort becomes pointless. You can pour out all your strength work to exhaustion, sacrifice, sleep, trade away time with those you love. But if you don't know what you're creating, all that labor will turn to ash, like the thrones burned in the carpenter's workshop. I've witnessed this countless times walking alongside adults. They aren't lazy. On the contrary, they're so diligent it commands respect. Calendars packed, always busy, first to arrive and last to leave. Yet when I sit with them one-on-one, their eyes hold only fatigue, emptiness, and confusion. Their efforts, however great, are just running, not living. They push forward as if chased, but don't know where forward is. Success doesn't come from speed, it comes from clarity. We live in an era that idolizes speed. Learn fast, work fast, react fast, adapt fast. The world keeps urging you to run faster, faster still, as if slowing down for a moment means you'll be left behind forever. But you know this running fast on the wrong road only brings you to the wrong place sooner. Like the carpenter, the quicker he worked, the sooner he reached disappointment because he didn't know what he was creating. Speed cannot replace vision. You can win a race, but if the finish line isn't what you truly want, what does that victory mean? You can cross before everyone else, but if it's not your finish line, you're simply the quickest to get lost. True success isn't arriving early. It's arriving at the right place. So before you rush to accelerate, pause to check your direction. Sometimes what you need isn't one more step forward, but to turn inward and ask, where do I truly want to go? Only when the destination is clear do your efforts gain meaning, and each step, however slow, brings you closer to the life you truly want. Being still to revisit the blueprint of the soul, that's what almost no one dares to do today. We're dragged endlessly by a noisy vortex of social media. Constant notifications, meetings, deadlines, goals to hit, ladders to climb. The mind runs hot like a machine spinning without rest. We think that's living, but in truth, we're just being carried away. Have you tried stopping for a moment? Just a moment. Sit still. Take one long breath and ask yourself, not with your head, but with your heart, what truly matters to me? Not what makes others admire you, not what gets you likes and praise, what makes your heart settle, gentle, and at peace. I've seen many who have everything the world calls success, money, fame, status, yet cannot manage a single genuine smile. They've spent their lives building a magnificent castle on an empty foundation, glittering outside, hollow within. When storms come, even a light wind can topple everything. That's why you need stillness. Only in stillness can you hear the true voice within. Only in stillness can you redraw your soul's blueprint so you can be sure that what you're striving to build is truly worth living. We cannot build a meaningful life if we've never once stopped to sketch its shape in the heart. You can spend your youth charging ahead, but if you don't know where you're headed, all that effort is like running in circles in a desert. The more you run, the more exhausted you become, yet the emptiness remains. Before you rush to carve wood, take time to find your own drawing. Sit down, be still, and ask, if I only get one life, what do I truly want to create? Not what earns applause, not what gets your name on leaderboards. What lets you smile in peace when you close your eyes, even if no one knows. It may surprise you, but stillness will take you farther than any race. When you stop, the path comes into view. When you stop caring about going faster than others, you can finally walk in step with yourself. Only with the drawing in your heart does each chisel stroke truly matter, not mindless strokes to fill time, but the lines of a life lived on purpose with direction, and most importantly, with a soul. You don't need to be faster than anyone, nor more outstanding than anyone. Life isn't a race. It's a journey to create what truly belongs to you. You only need clarity about what you want, about the values you cherish, about the life your heart longs for, and then day by day quietly carve it with all your patience and love. No need for noise, no need to prove anything. The throne of your life need not be the most resplendent, need not make the world gasp. It need only be a place you truly want to sit, where every line reflects your true self. Because in the end, the greatest victory isn't surpassing others, but being able to look back with a satisfied smile, knowing you lived true to yourself and created a life that needs no comparison, only authenticity. That night, the forest felt like it had fallen into an ancient dream. The Buddha and his disciples walked quietly beneath solemn trees, with only the soft murmur of wind, like the earth's whisper. Above them, the sky stretched a deep black, vast as infinity, and in its center, a full moon hung bright, shining like a pearl forgotten in the void. They had walked all day along paths strewn with fallen leaves and the scent of soil. So when they saw a lake lying still at the forest's edge, the Buddha stopped and gently signaled. The group sat by the shore. No one spoke. A light breeze brushed their dust-touched skin, carrying a faint fragrance of wild grass. The water was flat as an old mirror, so thin and clear it felt like looking into another world. Not a ripple, not a sound. The whole forest seemed to hold its breath. A young disciple, not yet 20, sat by the water's edge. His eyes lit up like a child seeing a wonder for the first time. The moon was printed perfectly on the lake, round as a silver coin, softly bright like the night's breath. Not clouded, not blurred, just a full, gleaming moon shimmering, and so still it was mesmerizing. He sat a long time, eyes fixed on the moon's reflection, as if hypnotized. Then he pressed his palms together, his voice trembling. "Master, the moon in the water is so beautiful. I want to touch it." No one answered. Even the crickets in the grass seemed to pause. He bent down, cupped his hands, and scooped the water that was holding the moon's image. Cool water slipped through his fingers, running down his thin wrist. But in his palms, there was only water. The moon's reflection shattered into thousands of sparkling bits, wavering like broken shards of a mirror. Alarmed, he scooped again, faster, harder. Water splashed onto his cheek, icy cold. But it was still only water. The moon broke apart and then vanished entirely, leaving a lake smeared with night. He froze, panting, his palms empty and cold. The wonder in his eyes turned to confusion. He looked toward the Buddha as if asking, why the Buddha smiled very gently. The moonlight reflected in his eyes like two small lakes. He didn't hurry to speak. He slowly lifted his hand and pointed to the sky where the full moon shone bright, steady, and untouched, even though its image in the water had dissolved. His voice rose low and soft like night air slipping through the leaves. Don't grasp the reflection. Admire the moon. The young disciple followed his hand, and for the first time, instead of looking down at the water, he lifted his head and looked straight at the sky. The moon still there, full and bright, unmoving. As beautiful as when he first saw it, only now he no longer tried to seize it. A breeze drifted by. The lake rippled and the moon's reflection disappeared completely. But the moon above remained bright and whole. The disciple sat a long time as if waking from a dream. His hands relaxed, and the last drops of water fell back to the lake, making small rings that widened and widened. He suddenly smiled, a faint smile, as if an invisible cord inside had just been loosened. And that night, by the clear lake in the forest under the full moon, quietly pouring silver light onto weary, thin shoulders, the young disciple understood. Trying to hold on to happiness is the quickest way to lose it. Because true happiness can't be held in the hand, only contemplated with the heart. The young disciple had assumed the moon was in the water, so he kept scooping, yet the more he tried to hold it, the more it slipped away. Each time his palms closed, the reflection shattered into glittering fragments and vanished, leaving only cold drops of water in his hands. Meanwhile, the real moon remained at ease in the sky, full and radiant, never harmed, though its reflection below had broken countless times. Just like you and me, we often chase the moon's reflections of happiness. We think happiness is something to obtain, to possess, to grip tightly so it won't disappear. We tell ourselves, when I have enough money, I'll be happy. When I'm recognized, I'll be at peace. When that person returns, I'll smile again. Those quiet promises sound reasonable, but they are the sweetest trap. Each time you get something, joy drifts off like smoke and you're left empty. You think you've caught the moon, but it was only a bright image in water. Then you spot another reflection, farther away, bigger, brighter, and the chase begins again. Year after year, you run toward finish lines that always seem within reach, yet you never stop to live a day fully. You keep thinking happiness lies ahead, and you forget the present, the only place happiness can ever exist. Like that disciple, you don't need to scoop water to have the moon. You only need to lift your head. True happiness isn't in what you own in others' praise or in success or failure. It's in the ability to pause, breathe slowly, and realize right now you are still alive, still able to love, still able to smile. The real moon doesn't need to be grasped, only seen. And happiness doesn't need to be chased, only noticed when you stop. Don't pursue the mirage of happiness. Happiness isn't in the things you are relentlessly chasing to exhaustion. It's not at some future finish line. not in applause from others, not in admiring eyes, or the certificates you hang on your wall. All of that fame, money, admiration, status are only shimmering moon reflections on the water. They can be lovely and enchanting, making you think that if you could just grab them, you'd be happy. But reflections are fragile. They always change shape. You can touch them, but when you close your hand, you find only cold water slipping through your fingers. Have you felt that after years of effort to achieve something you were sure would make you happy? A dream job, a grand house, a relationship others admire. Once you have it, the joy is brief, and then the same emptiness returns. Because true happiness has never lived outside you. The real moon isn't in the water, it's in the sky. Whether you look or not, the moon remains bright, full, and present. So does true happiness. It doesn't depend on how much you have, how far you've gone, or who approves of you. It's here now, in each breath you take in the quiet beat of your heart, in the hands that can still touch life with gentle gestures. You don't have to become someone else to be happy. You don't have to reach some peak to be at peace. You only need to stop. Stop running. Stop comparing. Stop trying to be good enough in someone's eyes. Turn back and look deeply into this moment where life is happening, where you are breathing alive with a new day to love, to learn to keep walking. Happiness isn't in the future. It's in your ability to be fully present now. Reality isn't flashy, but it's always true. It isn't loud, but it's always gentle. It may not give you everything you dream of, but it always gives you what matters most, a fresh chance to live fully. Try stopping. Place a hand over your heart, close your eyes, and listen to that quiet beat. Then smile softly, not because you've achieved something grand, but simply because you are here, alive, present. You'll realize you don't need anything more to be complete, because you are already part of this sky, like that moonlight, always shining, always present, whether you look up or not. Today's world keeps urging you to run faster, farther, better. Compete, outdo, constantly achieve more to be worthy, to avoid being left behind. Since childhood, we've been taught only with achievements, status, fame. Do we have value? But the Buddha reminds us, you are already worthy, even with nothing to prove. Your value isn't in what you accumulate. It's in your living presence in this very moment. You don't need to seize the moon's reflection. Just sit and look at the real moon. The reflection on the water may be beautiful, but a single ripple will shatter it. The real moon, always there, brilliantly bright, shines whether you look or not. So it is with happiness. It doesn't reside in what you tirelessly chase. Numbers, titles, applause. Those things are only reflections, beautiful, but fragile. You might attain them, but they won't keep you in lasting peace because reflections always change. True happiness doesn't need to be owned. You don't need to clutch it, control it, or prove you deserve it. You only need to be fully present with the small things happening now. A deep breath, a warm morning, a gentle conversation, a moment of quietly smiling to yourself. When you truly live with reality, you'll see nothing is missing, and there's nothing left to chase. Next time, your mind is in turmoil from feeling not enough, when you're exhausted from running after a hazy happiness, when you want to give up because it seems you'll never catch it. Remember the young disciple by the lake. He kept scooping water to catch the moon's reflection, and only when he stopped and looked up did he see the real moon still shining above. Likewise, True happiness has never left you. It's just that you've been bending down, scooping water too long to notice. Look up and smile, because the real moon has never run from you. When the story ends, perhaps what lingers most isn't the bright moon on the lake, but the moment the disciple stopped grasping at reflections and lifted his gaze to the sky. Just like him, you and I have bowed our heads too long chasing happiness's illusions. We thought we needed more, needed to do more, needed something grand before we had the right to smile. But in the Buddha's teaching, he never said happiness lies in the future. He taught mindfulness is the path to liberation. Only when you stop and return to the present can your heart touch the peace that has always been within. True happiness isn't loud or stage bright. It's quiet as a breath, a gentle look, a slow step through life. And you don't have to prove anything to deserve it. You only need to be fully present with yourself, with the ones you love, with the life unfolding right now. So next time you feel not enough, when your mind churns from pressure to catch a distant reflection, remember the real moon has never left the sky, and true happiness has never left your heart. If these teachings resonate with you, please subscribe to the Buddhism Seeds channel so we can grow seeds of mindfulness and compassion together each day. Like the video to spread a message of peace, share it with those still chasing their own moon reflections, and leave a comment below. What small thing in the present made you smile today? Who knows, your sincere answer might be the gentle moonlight guiding a wandering heart.